A BetterHelp ad. Therapy isn't just for times of major challenge. It's a valuable tool for anyone wanting to improve their well-being. It can help you develop healthy coping skills, set boundaries, and support personal growth. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a fully licensed therapist right from your phone. No commuting, no waiting rooms. And you can switch therapists at any time. Sign up at betterhelp.com and get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
What are you doing over there? Come on. No, it's staying in. Nope. It's part of the charm.
Well, we got it recorded, right?
I'm not going to lie. You haven't effed that up. I don't know if you've ever done that.
A lot of time.
This is like me forgetting to hit record on somebody's mic, and then we have to be like, hey, we're already 20 minutes in.
It's rare, but it has to happen. We can't be 100% all the time.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, diving back into the Roman Republic this time. It just never ceases to amaze. There's always something that comes out of this. The fact that this is almost like a secondary storyline in what's going on in the Roman Republic at this time is nuts.
Yeah. I don't know how many. I texted you a couple times about it. It feels like for as big as the Roman Empire, Republic, all of that was, there's like a period of 100 years that's all of like the most well-known stuff. And then you feel like because it's been around for so long, you're like, oh, that had to have like pieces of my knowledge have to span the entire 400 or whatever it was, 800 years that the Roman Empire existed. No, it's like, no, you just know a lot about like a 100-year period.
And I think the 100 years is so hot and heavy. It went on for longer than 100 years. But this yearly consulary change where you're electing new consuls every single year.
Yeah.
It's got everything going in so many different directions because not only that, you have consuls that are going out and conducting wars during that time. And if they're doing great, he might win the consulship again. Mm-hmm. But if he does shitty, he has to disband his army and then they have to send another consul out.
It's the most effective way to like re-up or to get into that position. Because you could sit there and try to make, stuff happen in Rome, try to pass laws, get stuff done. Regardless of how successful you are, you have a year to do it, which isn't much time. No. And at the same time, you have to campaign during that year. If a guy goes out and just gets battlefield glory, that's his campaign. Mm-hmm. And then that alone, bringing back that glory for Rome, that's what's going to beat anything that you're going to do.
That's why Gaius Marius goes on like a 4-year run from 104 to 100.
That's why Caesar does too.
Well, he then makes himself the dictator. He makes himself the man, but...
We're not far away from that, though.
No, and that's just it, is so much of these servile wars play into either a consul going out and trying to quell the rebellions, and that happens mostly in this third servile war that we're going to talk about. Spoiler alert, that's the Spartacus one. But you also have situations in the first two servile wars where they don't look at this as necessarily that big of an issue in these slave revolts while still being able to maintain their power, but it's because they only have a year to do something. So it's, do you go put down the slaves in Sicily, or do you try to fix something in Rome that everybody can see?
And secretly, when you're not trying to fight anyone, which I don't know if that ever occurred during that time, there was always someone to fight.
Yeah.
But at the same time, are you just hoping for when it comes your time to try to kind of like boost your standing? You're just like, okay, who are we fighting with right now? Who's someone that I can beat pretty easily. I don't got to hire a lot of guys, but I can still kind of like boost my standing by gaining glory for Rome. And then it comes to the servile wars, and you're just like, oh, come on. Especially the third.
Yeah. I think if you're going to choose a big win, though, or an easy win. Slaves should be the easy wins, but in all three of these occasions, the slave revolts were so immense and so large that it becomes a problem for just regular praetors or governors or anything like that to put these things down, and then they get replaced on a smaller level.
Well, and it's weird how it works too, because you would just assume like, oh, you're a guy in Rome, you're like a senator or something like that. So when you go, you're obviously taking like the Roman army with you. It's like, no, actually, because you're a private citizen, you're a senator, yes, but if you want to go try to, perform war, do whatever, you kind of have to fund that.
Yep.
The city's not doing that. What you gain from that, you get to keep, like with Caesar and Germany and all that kind of stuff. But you're hiring the guys that are kind of like mercenary-esque.
Mercenaries, militias.
Like part-time militias, and you're just throwing these guys together and hoping you can fund the equipment and all that kind of stuff. It's only when shit gets really bad that they're just like, okay, we need to send somebody with like the Legion.
Well, not only that, these mercenaries and militias aren't going to raid towns and villages and make a bunch of money. They're fighting people that had nothing to begin with, and that's why they revolted.
Yeah.
So even winning, there's no spoils of war to putting down a slave revolt.
So you're having to pay them. Yeah. It's not like, hey, guys, we're going to fight slaves. You guys can keep all the loot. They're like, what loot? Whatever they stole from all the other houses in the countryside, I guess.
It's sort of addition by subtraction done by somebody else.
Okay, well, before we get too far into it, remember patreon.com/historically high, bonus content every week. We're gonna pair up Gladiators with this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you
That's
listen to
on the
this,
way.
this will be the week that Gladiators comes out on Patreon, because we were doing some pre-show talk and we got some theories about gladiators. But anyway, this gladiators take place in this.
Yeah.
Servile War.
Third gladiatorial war. Ratings, 5 stars if you can spare them. Thank you very much. It does so much for us in the algorithms. Reviews, we love seeing what you like. We love seeing the recommendations that you make for other episodes. Keep subscribing. Numbers are through the roof. Thank you. And let's find out what the Servile Wars were.
I'm Chris, that's Adam.
Oh, yeah. It counts. It counts. It counts.
No. I heard you going into it for the music, and I was like, well, I can't say it now. So as soon as we could.
Yeah, well, I'm counting it. We're still there. We still got the streak going. Our big through line for all 3 Servile Wars in this story is going to be the story of Roman slavery. And
Servile.
yeah. I didn't put really, that word makes a lot of sense for slavery. I didn't quite come to that conclusion till a little ways into this. But slavery is something that, slavery predates written records.
Yeah.
It's been something for as long as there have been people trying to put people into bondage. Mesopotamians had slaves from war, from family members selling other family members into slavery during times of financial desperation.
So this is going to be, when they say prostitution is the world's oldest profession, is it actually slavery?
Slavery is not really a profession. You're not a professional slave. You're a piece of...
Slaver.
Oh, slaver. Maybe. Yeah, I can see that. I don't know. Because I'm sure that
you cannot be a slave without the slaver.
Yeah.
You got to be owned by someone. Like that's the
fair.
That's what dictates the whole slave thing.
The difference with Mesopotamia is that away from the Roman slavery it was kind of like a common localized institution. Like there wasn't this large slave-based economy. These were just in certain areas where they had gone and taken slaves from war, and we're like, all right, we're just going to sell them here. There's not one big slave market in the middle of Mesopotamia that everybody's being sent to. It's not like a pillar of the economy isn't the slave trade. Egypt, slavery consists of foreign campaigns. Again, you have these slaves that are toiling as domestic servants, temple laborers in the mining fields. So they are putting them into some domestic servitude, but at the same time, temple laborers and mining are all going to be kind of slaves of the state. Then in Tatooine, you had Jabba the Hutt, who used slaves as entertainment, servants. They were guards in his palace. Some of these slaves were used as food.
They were dancers.
Dancers, yeah. So
One of them was a princess.
It was just that big.
I love that you added
big
that
of a
in there.
deal.
And technically, if we're being, you should have put that first, because that was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So that could have been even further back.
I had to hide it. I couldn't start it up at the beginning, and I thought that I hit it well enough.
No,
but
you didn't. Because
sniffed
the
it
first
out.
thing my eyes went to, and I saw, I was like, you have Tatooine written up there.
Slavery in the Roman Republic was kind of foundational. They believed that this practice had dated all the way back to the times of Romulus and Remus when Rome was first founded.
When Romulus took Remus as his slave. Like,
well, yeah. But it was an incredible economic driver. Their footprint is expanding, and as they're winning these wars, military conquest is just bringing all of these people in. And they had kind of a weird rule about this as far as if you went and captured a place, you took slaves. But if they surrender, they most likely weren't being taken as slaves. But at the same time, if they're willing to surrender, they can be used as a vassal state or a protectorate, possibly.
I don't know if there was, I think it was loosey-goosey. I think it was Wild West. Like, places that didn't have anything of value simply had value because they had people there.
Yeah.
And that was always going to be a form of currency. That's why, what did they say was the percentage? Wasn't it like 20% of Italy or like 15% of Italy was non-slave?
Roughly 1 in 3 people in Italy were enslaved. So you
1
had
in 3 were enslaved,
yeah.
or 1 in 3 was not enslaved?
1 in 3 were enslaved.
Okay.
So you had 33% of the population. And I think that sort of plays into the Roman benefit, is because when you get into other places like I believe it was Sparta, where your slave numbers, and maybe Athens, your slave numbers are close to 50% of the population or being the majority, that's when things are really going to start to get fishy, because if everybody revolts and you don't have even enough population to be able to control it.
I think, and it was probably kind of a little bit different depending on where in Italy you were. Like in Sicily,
Yes.
that we're going to talk about a lot more. So that's where you might get a 60% enslaved population versus the other part.
Well, and that's exactly it. They had these huge numbers in the agricultural labor fields. There was household work. There was the Servii Publii, which were slaves that were owned by the state. There were slaves that worked in temples. But there's these higher concentrations in these rural areas. The reason there's higher concentrations in the rural areas is just because there's less Romans there.
And there's land to work.
Yeah.
So Sicily is basically the breadbasket of like Rome and the Roman Republic, because while you can grow things like olives, grapes, things like that on more of the terrain that like makes up the actual, what do you call it, the shaft of Italy? Just Italy itself, I guess. Yeah. I thought the boot was at the very end.
Okay,
or is
we'll
the
go
whole thing
shaft.
the boot?
I think the whole thing's a boot.
Okay. Shaft of Italy. Sicily had much better like actual farmland to like grow grain and everything. Like you could grow like cattle and stuff like that on the mainland, but they had to have so many more slaves on Sicily just because that was where it was one guy for like every 5 people that were on the land actually farming it.
And the thing about Sicily, we'll talk about it here in a second, is the amount of the land that gets taken up is eventually taken up because they were able to kick the the people from Carthage out.
Yeah, the Carthaginians.
So that way it allows all these Romans to just buy these huge tracts of land. Just to put a little kind of bow on slavery, as terrible as that sounds. They were classified as property. They lacked legal personhood. They could become free. They would become Roman citizens with restrictions. But if you were a free slave who had a child, that child would be granted full rights. The slave stigma is always going to stay. A lot of these people were branded with either "I've escaped" or something horrific branded onto their bodies. So even if they were free slaves or freedmen, they still bore the marks of slavery pretty much all over them. There were times that we get a little Thomas Jefferson-ish, where as slave owners died, they would write in their will that they could free slaves. The Romans didn't much like that system because they actually came up with a percentage. So like if you had 10 slaves, you could only free 2 slaves when you died. And then
Your slaves go to the state or some shit?
Go to the state, go to a family member, something like that. So even at the behest of these slave owners, the Romans were like, whoa, we can't have you guys releasing all your slaves into the public at once.
Hey, guy, what you doing? Yeah. Not so fast, buddy.
So this first servile war that Chris was just talking about in the beginning, the final kind of purge of the Carthage people, were expelled from Sicily after the Second Punic War. These Romans rushed into the island, just taking up as much of this newly freed land as possible, and they're getting everything at really, really low prices. Because, again, it's Sicily, you have to get there, you have to get all of your stuff there just to be able to make a buck, so they're not going to be charging premium prices.
It makes these Roman basic, like, mega farms, what are they called? The latifundia?
Is that what they were?
Yeah, that's what I probably completely butchered that name, but it said that you would basically have, like, because people, like, Crassus that we're going to talk about would have so much money. It's just like, oh, I actually own 1/6 of the farmland in Sicily.
I own 1/6 of that island over there. Along with Sicily's just perfect environment for growing things, you also had a situation where they're placed kind of strategically, where the flood of slaves that's coming in from northern Africa, you have the flood of slaves that's coming from Asia Minor and in the Middle East, and Sicily sitting right down below the boot is going to be a place where those slaves are going to be brought in. So the markets are going to be flooding in Sicily with slaves, which is a really, really, really bad thing. There was this conquest of Macedonia that, again, kept pushing them further and further into Sicily. Now, instead of just being around the shoreline, it's interior Sicily working on these farms. These new landowners are buying up so many cheap slaves that they're providing very little food and clothing. Their property. So you still have to do something for these people, but at the same time, if you have so many of them, it's not going to be, quote unquote, horrible to say again, cost effective.
Yeah, that's like the ugly part of it. All of it's fucking ugly.
Yeah.
But when it boils down to the math of being like, well, it's actually cheaper. There's so many coming in that it's cheaper for me to just continually lose them. It's like the fucking Pablo Escobar thing where he just had money he was going to lose to like water damage and rats and shit. It's just like, oh, the cost of doing business is that I just slowly kill them over time. And then I just replenish them at the same rate.
And that's so much due to the fact that the large number of slaves. I mean, if you worked a slave to death, you could go replace him for much less than it would be in the mainland. So it just becomes kind of this situation where these slaves are working their asses off. They're being worked to death. They're being provided with little to nothing, causing them to have to go out and rob and steal and do whatever they can to try to feed themselves and anybody else that's going to go out and work another 12-hour day the next day.
Yeah. So the way they track this back is to this guy. He was an extremely cruel, wealthy landowner named, is it Demophilus?
I believe that sounds right.
And this guy, his name was Eunice, actually. He was a Syrian slave who had claimed to be a prophet and oracle. He famously used like sleight of hand to breathe fire to convince followers of like his divine power. And he declared himself Antiochus. So I guess that would be his Greek name, his Roman name.
Assyrian name.
I thought his Assyrian name was Eunice, wasn't it?
So basically, the way that Eunice comes into this, 135 BCE, this man named Antigonus, is that what you were talking about as the slave owner?
I thought it was a Damophilus.
Maybe that was his second name. In Enna, in Sicily, employs Eunice and uses him as entertainment at parties. He's doing these sleight of hand tricks. Believes that he's a bit of an oracle. So he's going around the room and predicting these different things. And he's telling all of these Sicilians that are at these parties, one day I will be king and all of you will fall to my sword. And these people are so far off in their belief that this would never happen that they're just laughing their asses off. And Eunice, at one point during these parties, is saying, those of you who do not tip me will be the ones that I kill first. Those of you who tip me well, I might spare your lives. And everyone's like, this dude's a fucking clown. Yeah. This is never, ever going to happen. And then all of a sudden, one day, yes, Demorpheus, you're right, was a very, very bad man. He ended up punishing his slaves in a way where they ended up going and talking to Eunice, who believed himself a bit of an oracle, into figuring out how this was going to solve itself. Eunice, being an oracle, is like, well, I keep telling myself I'm going to be king. Now I have all these slaves coming to me saying that we need to rise up and revolt. The express way for me to become king is for me to lead this revolt and take over this area. He's like, no. I follow my prophecies. I'm going to make sure that everything is okay. And he ends up gathering up 400 slaves into this band, and he ends up storming Enna. They capture an unsuspecting city because nobody is seeing a slave revolt that's going to be coming through there. They end up sacking the city. They execute all the inhabitants. So even if somebody did tip Eunice well, he apparently didn't give two shits about that.
Is it when okay, so he's got like this second in command who's kind of like the military guy. You have basically like almost the spiritual figurehead in Eunice, and then you have this Cleon who's a
field commander.
Yes, it's not Sicilian, but when I look at it,
Cilician.
Cilician. There you go. Thank you. I know. I want to say it's Cilician, but it sounds so much cooler too.
Yeah, and all it is you're just basically missing the S on the front of it to turn it to Cilician.
So he's a Cilician slave, and he becomes like his military general.
And they come together in the weirdest of ways. And just to wrap up Eunice becoming Antiochus, Demorpheus is captured and he's tortured and killed. His wife is tortured and killed. They spare the daughter because the daughter was always very kind to the slaves, and they actually took her on safe passage to another city and dropped her off without messing with her or anything like that. The people in the city that they didn't kill were all the iron forgers, because they needed somebody to make them weapons to go lay siege on everybody else. Yeah. So they bound them all up. They kept them working in the forges. Eunice crowns himself Antiochus, as you were saying. He was a Seleucid king. It was a Seleucid royal family in his home of Syria. He ended up calling his followers Syrians. So no matter where they were from, as long as they were under Antiochus, they were going to be Syrians. Their revolt's spreading quickly. They're going around and raiding all of these other places. They're bringing in more slaves. And as you were just talking about, there's this separate slave revolt that pops up. 5,000 slaves were led by Cleon, and they end up capturing a town, Argentium, that was on the south side of the island. So you're looking at, I'm going to pull your clocks out here. You're looking at maybe 7 o'clock for Enna, and this is sitting probably right around like 5 o'clock.
Okay.
They end up coming and meeting up together, and Cleon is talking to Antiochus. It's like, wow, dude, you are an oracle. You must have known that we were going to rise up as you were going to rise up. I pledge my loyalty to you. Excuse me, as Chris said, he becomes this field commander, and this is where I have a major problem with these stories. I love these stories. They're fantastic. but you always have to look at where this is being written from, like whose perspective it is. And these are Romans that are writing this.
Yes.
The army supposedly grew to between 10,000 and 200,000 rebels.
I had 70,000 to 200,000. Even that, like, you always get the numbers that they say. Then you get the numbers that, like, 500 years later, they're like, they didn't have that many people, and they revised their own number. And then we have the number that we have to realistically look at now. You could probably say, if it's going to say 70 to 200, just say 70. That's the max. The max is going to be the minimum, I think, in a lot of these situations.
But at the same time, as a Roman historian, and you're telling this great victory of Rome, does it sound better if you beat 70,000 or 200,000 slaves?
Oh, I know.
Like, it's...
And because no one's going to question afterward, be like, oh my God, you guys defeated 200,000 slaves. They're like, yeah, we did. And no one's going to be like, well, then what did you guys do for slaves afterward? And he's like, there's always more slaves.
There's a Sicilian praetor.
We go on campaign.
Yeah.
Which is so fucked up that that's exactly what they do.
Well, we're running low on slaves. We better go conquer another area and bring them back in. The Sicilian praetor, he was, they're magistrates. They're kind of army commanders. They're a little bit of everything. As Chris was talking about earlier, as a praetor, you kind of have to have the ability to have the money to raise your own army.
There's a certain rank, right? And I can't remember what episode we talked about it. But there was, because we went through it pretty detailed, that you have to reach that rank before you're able to, like, field your own army, right?
Is that what it was?
I thought there was something about
something about it, but I don't.
I thought there was something about that.
I know that they can be forced out because he will be before this is all over. He takes his forces to meet this revolt. They're squashed and routed very quickly. Another bad thing about getting beat by a slave revolt is they are going to strip you naked and they're going to take all your weapons and all your armor and then use them against the next people. So not only do you lose, but your battlefield is just covered with naked dead soldiers.
As you send in soldiers, you're basically sending them supplies. Yeah. You're resupplying them.
By the end of the year, they had beaten forces of 3 other praetors that were on the island of Sicily. They occupied most of the island. So we're talking about a slave revolt that's now taken over pretty much all of Sicily besides the port cities.
Which, I mean, makes sense because even though it's just the Strait of Messina right there, there isn't like, hey, guys, load up 10,000 guys in boats and send them. You have to basically be like, what militia do we have on the island? Okay, start sending people over, militia people from the mainland, because all the professional soldiers are up in Rome. It's going to take them a while.
Yeah.
But we need to try to squash this thing now because then it gives us the glory. And if Rome has to intercede, they're going to be pissed.
If they have to intercede, they're going to be pissed because they're out taking lands and bringing in more slaves instead of going to kill the slaves that then would have to be replaced. They're not going to want to do that. All right, we're talking about slavery pretty fast and casual here. It's not because it's not that big of a deal. It's just because it's really tough to live through it. To live through talking about it.
I didn't realize it up until this. Well, I did, but that's just the underlying theme.
Yeah.
Of the 3 wars way prior to these 3 wars and for the Roman Empire and everybody else way after these 3 wars. But these 3 things were like all within the span of, what is it, 10 years? Does it end up being 10 years? Maybe
these were right around 60 years, these 3 servile wars. But what happens after the 3rd servile war is a decade.
Okay.
They were so confident, Eunice was so confident in what he had done that they actually began to mint their own coinage by the end of the 1st year. They had taken over so much of Sicily and were in such a comfortable position that he begins starting to mint his own coinage as king. That's a pretty far step into the hold that they had on Sicily, that was the thought process.
And that whole time, they're just building up, getting ready to launch like an invasion.
Yeah, 134, the Senate sends the consul Flaccus down with his army. Little is really known about the results, except for they needed a new consul in 133. Consul Lucius Calpurnius, Piso, is to go to Sicily to do the job, finally right. Piso ends up recapturing the city of Messana. He takes 8,000 slaves back. he's unsuccessful of a full recapture of this northern city called Tauromenium, and he ends up fizzling out. 132, new Roman consul steps in. Publius Rupilius ends up capturing Tauromenium and Eunice.
Oh, I'm trying to say that. It's, Publius Rupilius.
Rupilius?
That's a goddamn Harry Potter spell. That's just something. That's what it sounds like.
Severus Snape.
That
could have
sounds
been a
like
Roman.
something it speaks for itself what it sounds like.
So Tauromenium and Eunice are both captured at this point in time. Now we have Cleon that has to kind of step in and take that role over. The problem was he was able to take Tauromenium because he had slave spies inside that he had promised freedom to that allowed them to get inside the city. These occupying slaves were not only tortured, after they were tortured, they were just thrown off of a cliff. So that feels pretty unnecessary. You could have just thrown them off the cliff before you tortured them, because it's not like you're trying to stop them from doing it again if the ultimate goal is to kill them, right?
No, but if they were working, they were trying to get information out of them.
Yeah, could be.
I have to play advocate for them.
Publius's next move is going to be on Enna. It was basically the capital of the revolt at that point in time. Cleon is held up inside of Enna and ends up dying as he tries to burst out of the gate to break this siege to be able to escape the city and get out.
Yeah, he was gonna so basically they pulled the reverse on him. So once he came here, they besieged the stronghold, took him back, basically by starving the defenders, and then, like you said, exploiting traitors. How the same way they flipped it, they just did the same thing to try to get within the city walls.
There were around 20,000 remaining slaves that were crucified after this.
Or thrown from cliffs.
Make no mistake about it, a very Roman way of punishment of these kind of people was crucifixion. They seem to repeat this with a lot of big names after that as well. Interestingly about this whole first Servile War is Eunice actually lives to see the end of the war. He's held in prison and he's awaiting judgment. The Romans have a problem, because if they kill Eunice, they create a martyr. And if this guy who was claimed to be an oracle that he was going to become king and actually did get pretty close to king, there was a little spookiness within the Romans.
Well, I mean, his people knew him as a king, so according to everybody else that would actually follow his cause, he was a king.
They were a little spooked by the idea of maybe a deity ghost that was going to haunt
So they just
them.
end up putting him in prison and letting him die, right?
Yeah, he just dies of disease.
When you say dies of disease, you pretty much mean that they're just like throwing diseased bodies in with him and being like, "Oh, you got sick, did ya?"
The disease also could have been arsenic.
Yeah,
He could have died from arsenic.
he could have
disease.
died from what would it be? Lead poisoning?
Yeah. Why does my cup keep rubbing black onto my lips when I drink it? Don't worry about it. Just keep using it. Our second Servile War comes in 104. This is at the beginning of this run of consulship for Gaius Marius. And this is where we get into just the craziness of this timeline, because we're going to be talking about so many names that we talked about during the Caesar episode. Caesar, I believe, is born in 100 BCE, so this is 4 years before this happens. But consul and future uncle to Caesar, Gaius Marius, requests soldiers to go fight up in the Cimbri and the Teutons. He goes to Bithynia and speaks to the Bithynian king Nicomedes III, and he says, "We need army men to come up and fight."
He's like, "Okay, little snag here. Weirdly enough, Roman tax collectors have illegally enslaved my people to pay off debts that you said I owed. So I don't have anyone to fight for you.
I'd love to give you guys. I really would, because I think it would look
We're
good for me.
allies. We're supposed to be allies here, but somehow you're enslaving my people." This ends up, this ends up leading to the Roman Senate ordering that any enslaved citizens of allied nations are to be freed. Now, the governor of Sicily which was this guy, Licinius Nerva, complied and freed about 800 slaves.
I like this guy because this guy, very rarely do you have a chance to piss every single person off with a decision. And this guy makes decision after decision after decision until everybody's like, fuck you, we're done with this. You aren't going to do anything anymore.
And think of it this way. You're a slave down in Sicily, but your nation, because this is allied nations, your nation, you're not, the only reason you're probably not already free is because you're not close enough to your nation for people to know you're from there. Yeah. And in Sicily, they're going to be like, no, you're not. Be quiet. Don't talk. And so when the governor, this Licinius Nerva, ends up complying, frees about 800 slaves, a bunch of the wealthy landowners are just like, no. And he's like, wait, okay, not a good idea. So he halts the process and orders the slaves that he had just freed from these allied countries to go back to work. And they're like, you know what? No, how about we don't? And they immediately revolt.
Well, and in the meantime, you have these 800 slaves that are like, yeah, we're free. Everything's good. Mm-hmm. The rest of those slaves are like, what the hell, man?
Yeah. I'm from another different country. How do I know my country's not allied with Rome?
Why can't we be freed? What's going on? And then
it pissed off everybody. It pissed off the people that had to stay because they were like, they almost got to leave and I didn't even almost get to leave.
Then it also pisses off the landowners. It's like, hey, you're freeing my slaves. We don't really like that around here. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, I got to make you guys happy.
I got to replace them.
Yeah. In order to make you happy, I'm going to go ahead and send those 800 slaves back. So I've pissed off everybody in this circle of anger, and they end up rising up. You also have those 800 as they're being returned to bondage and things are going wrong. There's a large group of slaves that end up a revolt in Herculea. And the response to that is a detachment of 600 soldiers who were slaughtered and then robbed of their armor and weapons. So we're doing the same thing all over again, where you have these areas that are being overthrown by praetors that are making poor decisions, but then these other slave uprisings that don't have really anything to do with that are still springing up on Sicily.
So the key players in this one, a guy named Salvius, who we were talking about strains like Thracian something. Salvius has got to be something too.
I think it's too close to Salvia.
Is that what it is?
Possibly.
Okay. So anyway, this guy is a flute player and a diviner who's actually elected king by the rebels. Now you also have this guy named Athenion, who is a brilliant military commander and also astrologer from Sicilia, who joins forces with Salvius. So we have the same recipe going on in this. You have kind of a more charismatically. He's a goddamn flute player.
Not only
just plays himself onto stage.
We have Athenian, who also fancies himself a bit of an oracle.
That's why they just called them astrologers. Remember?
Yeah. Okay. These two follow. It's so crazy how similar these slave revolts happen, because not only is Salvius rising up just like Eunice did, he's also taking a Syrian name. He ends up taking the Syrian name. God, it was right there. Tryphon, who was from Diodotus Tryphon, who is a Seleucid ruler. So you have another Seleucid king having their name being taken up on another revolt in Sicily.
Well, and you know that the inspiration from that, because they would have heard stories from generations ago or however long it was ago, that there was a revolt and that it was from, the Syrians and everything. So, yeah.
Salvius sounds better, takes his revolt to Morgantina. Nerva ends up leading troops down there to meet them. Before Salvius ends up taking Morgantina, he just turns around and basically swats down Nerva's forces. Just, no, you made everybody mad up north. Don't try to come down here.
Let us do our thing now.
This is our deal. Puts them down. Salvius then turns and takes over the city of Morgantina, and his ranks are growing to more than 20,000 soldiers. He also has a pretty large group of horsemen because Morgantina had a bunch of horses in it. So now not only do you have slaves that are fighting on foot, you have cavalry, yes, which
and scouts and all the stuff that goes with it.
Only beneficial. The west of Sicily, as you were talking about, breaks out with Athenian. Cilician? Is that what we were going?
Cilician.
Cilician, yes. Which is just this group of people that was off of Asia Minor. And apparently they were very, very good sailors. Athenian wasn't a good enough sailor
That's
to run
why
out.
he had to know that, but that's why he had to know about the stars, so he can navigate.
Where do you think Athenian got his name? Sounds pretty Greek, right?
Well, yeah.
Pretty close to that. He sees these visions and he's hearing of the successes of Salvius, and Athenian ends up marching his forces to see how popular he was, and he sees that he's this adequate leader. And just like Cleon did, he drops to a knee and pledges his loyalty to Salvius. 103, Praetor Lucius, I love this, Lucius Licinius Lucullus, goddamn, triple L's. Lucius Licinius Lucullus is sent by the Senate. He was just off squashing a revolt in Campania. So this wasn't a slave revolt. These were just the people in Campania.
He was on Campania in Campania.
Huh?
If you pronounce campaign.
Yeah. Campania. So he was already pretty much dialed into where he needed to be to fight troops. He takes about 17,000 Roman soldiers and marches to Sicily.
Well, then sails to Sicily.
Yeah, it's tough to march across the water, I guess. They head to this place called Triacala, where Salvius plans to basically dig in, and Athenian says, no. We must meet them in the open. Very, very good strategy, because the revolt ends up camping about 12 miles away from the Roman camp, and they line up the next day for this pitched battle. And Lucullus takes out about 20,000 rebels. The rebels fall back and dig in at Triacala, and Lucullus begins a siege. But what it does was it pushes his timeline back. Because again, Lucullus, being a consul, is fighting this war of, I need to make something happen because I would like to be consul again next year.
Yeah. Well, and also that could have been a delay tactic, because like if we just let him start a siege, then it's from that standpoint. But if we delay him and battle him a little bit as we fall back.
Well, also, if we take out a fairly large chunk of their siege abilities,
Yeah.
it's all going to help out. At this point in time, Lucullus's time runs out. He begins this siege. He ends up getting replaced by a guy named Gaius Servilius. And he is some sort of sour about it, because he hears news that Servilius is going to take over his position. He just torched his own camp.
It's my stuff.
He destroyed all of his siege weapons. He burned everything that he could.
He's not going to help the next guy.
And he then retreats and just disbands his army. So now we're going to stick around to try to help this guy.
No.
Fuck him. We're going to burn the house down.
That's what's so crazy about it. That's exactly what he's like, oh, you're taking me off? You know what? Nope. New man. That's like going through and ripping out all the internet cables from like an office building.
Guess what, guys? You're starting from the ground floor, bitch. You're not building on anything.
Infrastructure, my ass.
Athenian ends up taking over as the slave king, just like Cleon had in 102 after Salvius' death. They end up attacking Servilius' camp, and Servilius loses everything. It's just one of those things where they showed up to this camp and there's nothing there, and Athenian sitting there looking at it like, hey, is their camp just smoldering? When the new guys show up, let's just go out and get them.
Yeah.
They're not going to be prepared for any of this. And it works. I do think that their story, Servilius kind of gets hosed in this situation. I'm not ever going to say that about a Roman or a Roman consul, but they both end up getting recalled back to Rome, and they both end up getting exiled for this.
Yeah.
Gaius didn't do anything wrong. Gaius showed up and there wasn't anything there to work on. What's he supposed to do?
Yeah. What did he expect?
Yeah. I feel like he kind of
That's what I'm saying. They're competing. They have inner competitions that they're not trying to do their replacement any favors. Because then the replacement already comes in with a leg up. They complete it. It makes them look even more inept of being like, you want that guy to fail so fucking hard?
Yeah. Well, no victory speech.
You send a message over to Antheon and is like, this is probably where they're going to land. Why don't you guys just follow us and watch us get on the boats and you guys can just get prepared?
There's never been a consul in history that's ever thanked the previous consul in his speeches for
as you pass
setting
each
him
other
up.
on the Italian side. He's just like, good luck. Landing zone's totally clear, man.
New Roman consul Manius Achilles is sent down to Sicily in 101 to crush the revolt. His senior consul, Gaius Marius, still sitting in there, gave him some of his soldiers that had just been on campaign in Gaul. So they've been up there fighting all of those Gallic savages. They're ready to go. It only takes one engagement for Achilles to basically squash the rebellion.
Well, I think he ends up killing Athenion in like single combat during the battle, and seeing their boss strike down your boss, that pretty much just snuffs out any of like the momentum that the resistance have. Again, the other guy had already been killed, so like this is their last person of leadership, or at least of significant leadership.
I still feel like it's pretty convenient in Roman writing to say that Achilles was the one that killed Athenian. Like he probably got killed from somewhere else. And
okay, well, I don't want to give spoilers, but I'm sorry, Spartacus dies at the end of this. So, because I need this to make a point. Then why didn't they just say that Crassus killed Spartacus?
Fair, because we'll talk about
what would get you more.
Belief story is. At the same time, though, we don't ever know that Spartacus was in the fighting. Like there's an alternate history here where Spartacus might have slipped out the back door and just gone and lived another life.
No.
Think he went out fighting?
No. Oh, yeah.
We'll find out.
Oh, yeah.
At this point in time, they end up taking 1,000 slaves to go back and fight the beasts. Mm-hmm. A little prelude to
back to Rome.
Gladiatorial stuff. This 1,000 refused to go. They ended up killing one another, basically
in the arena.
It happened in almost like a dominoes like fashion, right? They kind of lined up and one guy stabbed the other guy and then the guy behind him stabbed him.
I think they just ended up kind of like, because it said like rather than giving the Romans the satisfaction of like watching them die during this, they committed like a mass suicide in the arena just by cutting each other down.
And then the last guy
just kind of had to be
sword.
like, yeah, I don't know. But I mean, I get the point. Like, we're not going to give you the satisfaction of fighting these animals, like treating ourselves like animals.
Well, we were slaves. Then we took back some of our freedom. Then you guys took us, and now we're supposed to be entertainment.
Yeah,
like, we found almost a lower form of slavery than working
this
the
is our
fields.
last. What is it? What am I trying to say? Like protest of our own like judgment that we get.
Yeah, I could see that. That's the end of the Second Servile War. Now we get into the big guy.
Yep. Before we do that, let's take a bathroom break.
Come on.
A BetterHelp ad. Therapy isn't just for times of major challenge. It's a valuable tool for anyone wanting to improve their well-being. It can help you develop healthy coping skills, set boundaries, and support personal growth. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a fully licensed therapist right from your phone. No commuting, no waiting rooms. And you can switch therapists at any time. Sign up at BetterHelp.com and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Well, hello. Listen, while we head to the restroom and get ourselves something to drink, why don't you do something nice for yourselves? Head on over to patreon.com/historicallyhigh and get signed up for a little bonus content. I mean, come on, you deserve it.
If you want to keep up with this, our main source of social media is going to be our Instagram, which is Historically High Pod, Pod.
You can also head over to, it's Twitter, it's X, it's Twitter, come on, at Historically High, and that's high, H-I, like high.
If you have any recommendations you want to get to us, just want to reach out and say hello, you can hit us up on our email at historicallyhighpodcast, HIGH podcast @gmail.com.
All right, and with that said, let's get back to the good stuff. All right, and now we come to, yeah, like you said, it's the Spartacus one.
Yeah, we got to get into the star of the show here. And by saying we got to get into the star of the show, Spartacus is one of those guys in history who becomes famous, and we really don't have shit about him prior to. Enough so, he was born probably sometime in between 103 and 101 BCE. I saw a lot more stuff leaning towards 101, but there was enough 103s to be like, well, I can't say for sure. He was born in kind of this northern Greece-ish, more in current-day Bulgaria area known as Thrace. Mm-hmm. And Thrace is maybe one of the coolest places that I've ever heard to come from. Thrace sounds badass. That sounds like a very cool place.
I'm trying to kind of picture what Thrace, so it's still Mediterranean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like at the top of the Aegean?
Yeah, it's landlocked.
Okay.
But you're still kind of in that same area. You don't have any kind of solid one-party rule. It's very tribal, so you get a lot of kind of how we have Native American tribes iron sharpening iron and becoming kind of crack fighting forces.
Yeah.
Thracians are known to be some badasses on the battlefield.
Probably why they're not like already conquered or Rome with them, or they might have been, because there's some talk about like Spartacus actually, as he gets a little bit older, prior to actually being taken as a slave, possibly serving in like the Roman auxiliary, or as I'm guessing some type of forced, forced into the military.
I have a feeling that the Roman auxiliary is a little bit of a justification, or not a justification, but this is why he was so good at what he did.
Wait, so you're saying that like because I see where the line connects. He knew how, because he does a lot better as far as any other slave revolt did against, military commanders.
Yeah, so if you can say that he was a part of your Roman legions.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is like in the same sense of, hey, we just came in, the thing that happened in, what was the country we just talked about?
Sicily?
No, the one that the guy was like, hey, I'd love to loan you some soldiers, but you took all my people's slaves. Anyway, the same type of deal, like if that happened with Thrace. Yeah. He was forced to serve Rome, so he kind of developed an idea of like what their tactics would be.
I could definitely see that. There's just the questionable story to slavery. The Romans give him credit by saying that he could have been a part of the Roman auxiliary. Thracians were just great fighters. And also there's kind of the weird part of him and his wife are both sold along the same lot, which if you get drafted into the military and then you become a slave after you're in the Roman military, your wife's probably not coming along with you to these stops.
Well, what they were thinking is that it could have been for like desertion. And they knew where his tribe was because they had come and recruited him. They said he was part of a tribe called like the Madai. And if he deserted and then went back, because he's not going to like just not go back to his wife. So if he goes back to her and then all of a sudden a Roman patrol shows up looking for deserters and they see him there, they're going to take him and her.
That makes sense. I had never seen that or looked at it that way, but yeah,
I'm sure. And then I'm pretty sure that they would be split immediately at that point, just probably taken at the same point.
Yeah, they end up basically being sold in the same slave lot, and end up both being enslaved outside of a place called Capua. Spartacus becomes a part of the gladiator school, the ludus of Lentulus Bati. Fuck.
It's Gnaeus
Batiatus.
Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus Batiatus.
Okay. We'll just go with Batiatus. That
Yes.
seems like the easiest name out of there. This Batiatus group of gladiators were pretty prominent entertainers in the region. These gladiator schools, like I said, or like Chris said earlier, for the Patreons, we're going to dive pretty deep into this come Friday. But as far as these schools go, you have gladiators who began their lives as working basically like gladiatorial games at funerals as like a nod to the man going into the afterlife.
Not saying that that's where you like cut your teeth, but the act of like the business of gladiators and of like fighting as entertainment gets its start based upon like funeral rites or homages that are paid during. And then it grows from there as people are just kind of like, hey man, did you go to the Johnson funeral last week? And they're like, they had guys fighting. Like, man, I wish there was other places we could watch guys fight. And then
why did somebody have to die for us to watch people fight?
Yeah.
These schools are become kind of these thriving buildings of churning out entertainers, while at the same time you kind of have to come to grips with all of these gladiators being slaves, yet their station of slavery is so much higher than everyone else's that they are basically given diets to be able to sustain themselves through training and fighting because they're moneymakers.
Yeah, but it's all as a business. So you have this guy Batiatus who runs the school, or the school's ludus. Anyone who ever watched the Stars series is very familiar with these names. God, I'm trying to remember when that series came out, but man, it was right around like when 300 was really popular, and that's why I did like the stylistic stuff. But that just show had a lot of humping in it.
So like probably 2010, 2011-ish?
Probably somewhere around there. So he runs this ludus, but his prestige in the city as a businessman is completely tied to the success of the fighters in that. So if you want the best fighters, you have to feed them the best diet. You have to have the best trainers, or doctore. And so it's this constant thing of like just trying to, and that all comes to like a head, and that all comes as a result of what is seen in the arena. Was it the best show? Do you have the most survived fighters? Like, does the crowd like your guy best?
If you can have a gladiator school that is prominent in the region and can send all of these different gladiators out to fight for all of these shows in the area,
you're renting out gladiators.
You're going to be able to make a lot of money the next time you need to go rent out more gladiators. So it really only behooves you to take care of the slaves in your school, because they're the ones that are going to draw the crowds that are going to get you paid. It's just so weird to think that we're talking about slaves in a sense to where like they have masseuses that will rub them down after training and be taken care of, and then go back and basically live in like these prison cells based upon,
because it's all about like performance.
So we're going to train our prisoners, but we're never going to give them any sort of weapons that they can turn on us and kill us.
I mean, we give them training stuff that they have to work with.
It's like wooden swords, though.
Yeah, but at the same time, these guys are you think they couldn't kill some guys with wooden swords?
True, yeah.
I think they said the wooden swords, we're going to get off this gladiator thing because we're going to record the other episode, but these things would weigh like 4 times the weight that the metal swords would weigh, just to build up strength of being able to like swing these things.
Swing with a donut.
Just subscribe to the Patreon. It's going to be an awesome episode. Okay. So Spartacus is bought by this guy, and the ludus, like you were saying, it's like a barracks, a fortress, and a high security prison that just is there to churn out. It's a meat market is what it is. Churn out the best fighters. Capua, the ones that, that were at Capua were kept kind of in close confinement, not because they had like committed any crimes at the school, but apparently Batiatus was just a huge dick. So out of the multiple luduses that were probably around Capua, which was a pretty big city, I think it was like, 120 miles south of Rome.
Yeah, it was a pretty big suburb, I think.
This school was known for more of its like cruelty. So you're still bringing in a whole bunch of guys. You just don't have the expansion that you need to not have them sleeping on top of one another.
And it works. That's the shitty thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is the bad trainer is the guy who seems to be getting the results.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that treatment starts to foment this feeling of we have to do something about this. We have to try and break out, except for the first two Servile Wars that we talked about. Boom, Sicily. You're out on the island. You're not going to be taken as seriously because you are out on an island that's kind of a new possession of Rome.
It's kind of like you automatically have, like, guys, here's the big pitch for the revolt. If we can take control, we have a minimum of a year before they can actually respond to this and bring a force over that can try to challenge us. Think of what we could do in a year. Here, you're in the middle of like a city or close to a city, and not one that you probably have enough guys at the ludus that even if you could get them all to revolt at the same time, would have enough to overtake this city. You'd have to immediately leave.
Yeah. And they did. I mean, to their credit, this whole plan that gets hatched in 73 BCE, there's a group of 200 gladiators at this Batiatus ludus who were planning this revolt.
Well, I got some Spartacus facts real quick before we get into that real quick. So we're going to talk about it more again during the gladiator episode, but there's many types of gladiators. So Spartacus is trained as what's called the Murmillo. And this was like a heavyweight class of gladiators styled after Roman foes. So he was Thracian and everything like that. So they would have them fight in fighting styles that they would be able to use in certain games or contests where the heroes would be, Roman soldiers, or they'd be fighting against like looking like they were Romans. He would have fought wearing like a thick, large-brimmed helmet featuring this like fish-shaped crest, thick leather or metal sleeve like on his right arm or his sword arm, and then you would have the kind of like the shin bracers. Apparently, like none of this stuff was just like, hey, pick your stuff out. It was all like a set of rules for if this guy was fighting in this style, this was what he had to wear. So that way, when you were fighting and planning a match and you had two separate types of fighters, you would know who was who. They would have specialized weapons and like their strengths and disadvantages.
Quite possibly. As I was looking at these build outs,
yeah,
I guess you could call it, for these gladiators, the thought of just having, because the kind that Spartacus was, they have a fairly hefty shield, like it's a shin, big, like a shin to shoulder shield.
It's basically what you would think of like a legionnaire shield.
Yeah.
Would almost be able to, yes.
So because you have that, he's not wearing a chest piece. He's not wearing anything but these bracers on his legs. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have any protection on his left shoulder or his left arm because that's what sits behind the shield.
And then he also has, he has a gladius, which is like more of a short sword.
Yeah.
The ones you're probably more familiar with from like the movie Gladiator and everything. So he doesn't have, and I think they said that was like 18 inches. So everything was planned how they had these fighters. It couldn't be too long of a sword because you couldn't give him too much reach to be able to hide behind the shield.
And then on the exposed arm, they're just like, we'll wrap it in leather.
That's where they had the leather of the middle, like sleeve.
So you just have like a shooter sleeve on your
I mean, it could
arm.
still deflect something. And that goes to when we talk about the survivability of these guys, how it wasn't like, hey, you're fighting to the death every time. No, these guys were meant to put on a show. And kind of contrary to like the lean, like just jacked dudes that you always see in these shows, these guys were fed like a high carb diet. Mostly, I think they said they were vegetarian, and consisting like mostly of like barley and beans. It would build this thick layer of like subcutaneous fat, which would bleed a lot and make it look really good when they got cut, but it's not cutting the muscle down below. It's not cutting any organs or anything. So they were able to take more damage or to make it look like they were, which again, that's going to lead to us talking about these fights that probably to a degree could have been like practiced or staged to really like hype the fuck out of people.
But it worked.
But yeah, I mean, this allowed them to basically imagine if you're just like totally like jacked, you get cut, that's going right through the muscle. That's a lot harder to heal from because the muscle's not going to be repaired like it would be if it was just skin and fat. And so this allows them to basically be bleeding Hogan style, taking the razor blade, blading themselves just to look like they took the steel chair right in the head, but without actually dying.
Obviously they're slaves, so you don't have to pitch them a whole lot, but they're like, why are you feeding us this diet? We're going to build this subcutaneous fat so that way when you get cut, it's not going to kill you. Like, well, it's still going to hurt. Like, we don't give a shit about hurt. We want a good show for the crowd.
Yeah, it'll heal, and it'll keep you from dying.
Yeah. I guess that is the pitch. Is
no one's going to be like more food and less of a chance to die, but I want my six-pack to show. These women are wanting to fuck these guys regardless.
Yeah. Dad bod was a safety feature back then, and it was also attractive with what you could do.
I feel like this is more than dad bod. I feel like this is almost, if you're thinking about it, kind of more like power lifter.
Okay. Yeah, not really a Bert Kreischer
You're
type
cultivating
body.
mass. Yeah, you're wanting to move mass. Because every bit you can, that's also going into your strikes and your blocking. All right, so getting back to 73 BC, like you said, about 70 to 80 gladiators plotted an escape. There were more initially.
Yeah.
200 initially, 70 to 80 actually go through with the plan.
Somebody got cold feet.
A lot of people got cold feet.
Somebody actually went to Badiatus, was like, they're going to rise up. Mm-hmm. And in true, I guess, gladiator fashion, trying to make something work, they all ran towards the kitchen.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got to cut shit, right? Now, these houses actually had like house guards or little garrisons. So they had guys there that were wearing armor, that were trained soldiers or former soldiers, and there weren't weapons left out. When they were training, again, they're trading with these wooden sticks. Weapons are kept in like, especially at times when there's multiple guys out in the yard, they don't give them all weapons. There might be like, hey, 2 of these guys can go out and actually fight. We're going to have more guards stationed around it in case they get any ideas.
You guys just need a pair of swords. We're not going to give you all a sword.
Yeah, exactly. And so they end up getting meat spits, kitchen knives, fighting past the guards, which you know what these guys are capable of because you've been watching them train. You have probably gone and watched them at the arena and you're guarding this house. You've seen these guys do some crazy shit, take damage, take cuts. As soon as you saw one of these motherfuckers and you're like, oh my God, he's got a knife.
He has a spit in his hand. He has a lemon zester. And he's going to fuck me up with a lemon zester.
Has any man ever met his end by lemon zest?
You're kind of hanging back as a guard. You're like, okay, all the guys with the knives are out. All the guys with the spits are out. Next guy that comes out, I'm grabbing him. He fucking comes out with a meat hammer and just brains you immediately.
I do hope that it happens and occurs like it does in the series where there's like a party going on at the same time. And they just wreck everybody, all this like Roman high society.
Oh, so not even just security, but the bystanders too.
All of them. Because they're there for like a demonstration of, I'm going to dip back and forth. This is the show. But he has brought everyone, he suspects Spartacus of plotting. So he has this plan set up to where, Crassus is banging Badiatus' wife. Yeah. So he has it set up, where Crassus gets poisoned, and he's going to have him fight Spartacus because they're the 2 most popular gladiators in Capua, which, again, Spartacus was a fighter in Capua, so people would have known who he was and watched him fight. But
he fought Crassus.
Yes. So he basically, Badiatus sets it up to where Crassus is going to be killed for all of these people. And Spartacus has been trying to convince him. He's like, you got to join this revolt, man. All of the Gauls will join us if you join us. And so like at the last moment, Crassus realizes what was up and gives Spartacus this little tap on his shield that they did from a move when they were fighting this guy earlier on the season. And he jumps off it up to the balcony and goes to like stab Badiatus. And he pulls a guy in front of him and it stabs him through the head. But then that like launches into like the the actual takeover.
Huh.
Probably didn't happen like that. They probably just walked out, killed a few guards, and walked out at night. But they did end up walking basically right into a wagon full of gladiator weapons. And they were like, oh, thank you. Now we're all armed.
If you can have a basis in reality that's as insane as a slave revolt, you can do magic with it in the writing room. Mm-hmm. It's just such a perfect story to be like, okay, we have to punch this up, but we have to punch this up in a way to where it's just cool.
Well, and logically thinking, them escaping is going to gain the same punishment as them escaping, but murdering all the people that had been tormenting them at the same time, right?
Yeah, there's
so no reason not to.
Worse.
Yes, no reason not to do that.
It's got to be the luckiest time in history, because after they end up breaking out of this school, they just run tip first into a baggage train that's carrying all of these gladiatorial weapons and armor off to some other school or an arena. Tell me that's not the luckiest thing in the world, that a group of gladiators runs into a baggage train that's carrying all of their equipment.
I think they would have been happier to run into a baggage train carrying military equipment.
That comes.
It does, but at the same time, because guess what? Some of these guys are like, there's only partial pieces of armor. Who's this fighter? Who's this? And they're just patching it all together.
I never trained in that gladiatorial style.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't use a trident.
Still, much better than kitchen knives and like spits.
You can make something work. You can figure out something.
So
something they did.
Yes. So they end up choosing Spartacus, Crassus, and a guy named Oenomaus as the leaders. They defeat a small force of troops that are sent after them from Capua. And as they are just beating these guys, they're then just like, thank you for the better equipment. We will take this. And then they're just continuing on their way. If you're also sending out a force, you're sending them out with like rations, possible camping equipment if they're pursuing a force or anything like that. And this is just a constant resupply as you're sending these smaller forces to try to take out professional fighters.
And not to get too deep into this, I feel like we're going to get into some very common sense talk later on as to why things maybe didn't happen or why things did happen the way that they did. But if you're a slave that becomes a gladiator, and it's really the only weaponry and armor that you know how to fight in and wear, do you think that there were guys that just bypassed the army equipment that they just stole off these guys and were like, I know how to fight in this getup?
I think they would fight with maybe the weapons that they were used to, but I think that they would have a chest piece and leg bracers and all that kind of stuff, because for them, what good does that do? They're not putting on a show. It's all about survivability and trying. In the arena, it is about giving the crowd not a quick death or anything like that.
Yeah.
And like we're going to talk about, so few of these actually led to deaths. But it was entertainment. It was putting on a show. And so you were meant to draw it out, to make these feints, to make these moves, to make it look good. On the battlefield, it is about me surviving and me killing that other guy as quickly as possible. And as safely as possible for myself.
So it would maybe almost be a hybrid to be like, I'm going to keep the same shield that I know how to use and the same sword that I know how to use.
I'm going to swap out the stuff that keeps me alive, and I'm going to keep the things that kill other people the same.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Now, they kind of went around Capua for a little bit, doing some recruiting, freeing other slaves, basically just growing their numbers, and eventually, after gathering enough resources, they decided to take up a more defensible position on Mount Vesuvius. Now, this was at a time when Vesuvius was very lush, hadn't erupted, anything like that. It was where a ton of like the vineyards and everything were right out of Pompeii on that side.
It had erupted to the point where all of the soil was fertile and able to grow different things. But as you climbed further and further up the mountain where it was still just ash and lava, very few things were able to grow up there.
But I mean, they were up on the side of it.
Yeah, and you just want the high ground, and it's the highest ground you're going to get to try to defend.
But it's not the best place to be if you're trying to survive, because not a lot's living up there.
And it caught me, I think even before we started researching, do you remember talking about Spartacus escaping up to Vesuvius when we were doing the Pompeii episode?
Yeah.
And it just completely clicked through again that they don't happen anywhere around the same time. Vesuvius hasn't erupted and covered Pompeii yet, but it puts you in a place to where we can kind of understand and be able to explain. And if you have listened to the Pompeii episode, where they're running roughshod around there is all this vacation area for all of these rich Romans where they have all of their houses.
A bunch of rich perverts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a situation where now they are free and loose. They've grown their numbers, and they're in an area where all these rich people back in Rome that may either be in the Senate or have friends that are in the Senate are saying, hey, there's a slave revolt around my vacation city.
Yeah.
I would like you to maybe make haste and get on this a little faster than
Do you
would
want
if
me
it
to
happened.
contribute to your campaign for whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't give too much of a shit about what was going on in Sicily with those guys, but that's going to ruin my jet skis.
So, after taking up a position on Mount Vesuvius, this guy named Praetor Gaius Claudius Glaber. Yes, he is a bad guy in the show. You really get to know him. Him and Spartacus have like not in reality, because you wouldn't know this guy, but basically he is able to gather this 3,000 man militia force and is like, how many of them can there be? 70 to 80 of them escaped from the ludus. We probably have a rough estimate of how many people have like also gone with them. So 3,000 actual trained, even militia should be able to take out 70 or 80 gladiators. Now, he also basically is like, I'm not just going to go meet them in battle, though. There's one path going up the way that they came. I'm going to basically just block that and set up camp down here and starve them out. So when they do come down here, they'll be nice and weak.
Smart. It's the tactically correct decision to make.
I'm going to look so good. I'm going to have so many men come back, and I'm going to be just like, oh, they were so easy to beat. Like, look how many my guys are uninjured.
I don't fault Glaber in the slightest for this strategy.
Of course not. I just think of it differently because he's such a dick in the show.
Okay.
I'm just like, you fucking pussy. Go up there and fight him. But
yeah. In a TV show, you want the fighting to happen.
But in true fashion like that, like the character on the show, he didn't bother to build like a fortified camp because he assumed that they were actually trapped up there. He had blocked the only one with like probably like a palisade and like guard posts and stuff like that. But the camp itself, he was just like, nah, we'll notice them coming down here. We'll be able to get everyone roused and then we'll be able to fight them. Well, Spartacus basically has them gather a shit ton of like these vines and weave these really long ropes. And where they were at, it was like cliffs on each side. And they use these vines to basically repel. I'm not sure how many of them there were. I think they said that there was something like a small rebel force between like 70 and a few hundred, based on how many people they'd also taken with them.
Yeah.
Brought them down these sheer cliffs and circled around the mountain and ambushed the camp while it was sleeping.
They pulled the most famous Greek counteroffensive of all time.
The Pompeii switcheroo?
It took them from the rear.
Yeah.
As soon as they take them from the rear while they're asleep, you made the tactically correct decision. You just didn't count on the guy up on the mountain being smart enough to build ropes to climb down on the cliffs and come up and get you from behind.
That's where you get into that mindset of being like, we're the technologically advanced, civilized Roman militia, Roman army and everything. We have this hempen rope that we use or whatever it is. No, they're not going to think that they're going to make shit out of vines.
No.
They think these people are savages that fight for, entertainment in the arena.
Apparently they know how to weave rope.
Yeah.
Out of vines. It's just such a quick, sheer, swift defeat of the first on land, not on an island group of soldiers that get taken out by these slaves. And when we're talking about those numbers down in Sicily, even on the low estimates, if we're talking about 20,000 rebels fighting against the militia, that's a pretty fair fight.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about 2,000 or 200 slaves, maybe roughly 300 at most, against, if it's true, 3,000 militiamen.
Yeah, well, how many militiamen count if they're sleeping?
Yeah, maybe, but still, even 1.5. If you can catch on average 1.5 guys.
They got no weapons on them. They got no armor. It's in the dark. Like, that's why these guys are able to slaughter nearly the entire 3,000 man militia with minimal casualties. And now guess what? All of that supplies goes right to them. They go from basically wearing, like you said, their gladiatorial stuff and everything to being like, oh my God, we now have tents for camping, stuff for cooking food, all of the rations that they had sent here because they were planning on keeping us up there as like a blockade from getting down the mountain. So all this stuff is able to not only outfit themselves, they got 3,000 guys worth of this. So any other slave that now comes in there that's able to fight, they're just like, and here's some armor for you, sir, and here's some weapons for you, sir, and here's your tent.
And how much of that makes it back to the next group of Roman soldiers that are coming to fight them? Like, you're showing up on the battlefield expecting to fight these slaves in maybe gladiators' armor, and then you show up and these guys are wearing the exact same build out as you.
Well, and not just that is, when you're fighting, it's not just like infantry, dude. You have people that specialize in different things. So you're not only getting like short swords, you're getting heavy javelins. So now you're being able to attack from range. You're getting spears, so people will be able to stab when they're making a shield wall. You're basically now creating the way that you fight because you found it so effective. You're giving them all of the tools to then fight you in the same way and not fight you as they already know how to fight.
Yeah.
These are professional fighters. Now you're giving them the tools that you need to even be decent at it.
The worst thing that you can do is come to just a one-on-one fight with one of these gladiators.
These guys just work out all the
Yeah.
time, lifting shit and trying to kill each other. But yeah, they also get like chainmail, bronze helmet, curved wooden shields. So now even more defensible. They had, like I said, they had prepared for like a long starvation siege. Now, also hearing this from all around the area, you get all of these agricultural slaves that just are like, what just happened? Not only is there a revolt going on, not only did he just beat Praetor, but if we show up now, they're talking about like food, shelter, a chance to fight back. And he just arms these people that are just flooding toward Vesuvius now, kind of where they're camped out. And it ends up swelling up to an estimated, again, this is 70,000 to 120,000 with rural slaves, herdsmen, and these impoverished like slave laborers.
He is providing so much confidence that there's actual freedmen that are poor, that are stacking their chips with Spartacus and saying, I'm not a slave, but I'll come fight for you. That's what they're doing to these Romans that are showing up to try to fight them, is they're just like, well, I'm poor and you're the best chance at me to stop being poor potentially. Even though you're a slave, I'll take my chances. We'll see what can go on fighting with you guys. It's incredible to think. I mean, 70,000, again, the Roman Empire is huge. There's a lot of people there. 70,000 seems like a pretty big number. 120,000 to me is when I start sniffing a little bullshit. And 70,000, I believe.
And he's going to continue to bring people in as they move through new areas that have a whole bunch of slaves, because it's not like after they get done raiding these estates, they're going to be like, by the way, you're all still slaves. They're going to be like, no, come with us. You guys look really tough. Like, here, have some swords. So basically following this, embarrassing defeat by the first commander, Rome sends this guy, Publius. Is it Publius or Publius? Publius Verinius, who gets dispatched by the Senate with a larger force of a few thousand men. And they're still not taking this seriously enough. They just think that this Glaber guy got backdoored by like a surprise attack and it was a fluke. So they're not sending like veteran legions. They're just like, hey, Verinius, go ahead and march down. And as you're marching south, do a little bit of conscription or hiring people. We'll give you some money and just, get like a militia together. Don't worry that they haven't fought together or anything like that, or that they might be from different parts of the country that you don't fully understand. Just hire them and get it done. And as he's marching down south trying to get these people together, this is also someone that might not be really apprised of the situation, and also maybe that militarily competent.
Yeah,
because they're not taking it seriously. They've seen these slave revolts before. This is a small one.
I just
And
don't
it's
know
on the
how you.
and it's on the mainland. So they're just like, it's not going to get that crazy. They're not going to have time to build up strength.
How do you prepare for it, though? I mean, there's no. If you're fighting other revolts that happened that weren't slaves and they were just like other areas that were trying to rise up and try to free themselves from being a part of your empire, you're fighting against soldiers at that point. These guys aren't fighting against soldiers. They're getting better. They're turning more into kind of soldiers themselves as a group. But in the end, you're still fighting a bunch of guys who were trained in a completely different style of fighting than you are. You're just hoping that your military strategy is sound enough to be able to beat something that you have no idea where it's going to be fighting from.
But you have to have people that understand that strategy. Like veteran legions, like going in there, knowing how to do like shield walls and things like that.
Yeah.
That have been in war are much different than like militia who haven't fought together, who probably don't have the best equipment, and quite frankly, are looking across and seeing these crazy ass former gladiator dudes that are huge, just freaking, and they're just like, nope, fuck it, I don't want to do this.
And we do have to say, too, that the amount of gladiators out of the 70,000 is not all 70,000 gladiators.
It's not 70, no. There's like a lot of people, a smaller portion, but you now have 70, even if you just have the 70 to 80 gladiators, you have 70 to 80 extremely capable fighters now training other people to fight.
That had almost an entire winter to be able to just focus on training up all these troops. There might have been a little fracture in the group. I think a lot of it is kind of when it comes down to what their ultimate goal is.
Oh, hold on real quick. We got a little bit more.
Okay.
Well, we still have what happened to Vernius when he ends up walking down there.
Yeah, just kind of setting the stage, maybe get into a mindset of why. I guess like start trying to plant in your head, all of these things are coming up for the gladiators, for the slave revolt.
Yeah.
But at the beginning, if you don't have an ultimate goal of where to go, there kind of becomes this time of like, yeah, we're winning and we're doing well, but what are we going to do with it?
They're kind of figuring it out. They're like, so now we got this far. Okay, what's the next step? They're not trying to plan too many steps ahead until they get into a position where they kind of have to confront that. So when Vernius ends up going down there because he has to march down there so quickly, after he reaches southern Italy, he basically is like, okay, what we're going to try to do is I'm going to split my forces and I'm going to outmaneuver them. And all Spartacus does, he's like, okay, he's splitting his forces. Well, we're not going to try to wait in the middle where they're supposed to be scheduled to get here at the same time. We're going to go attack one weaker side, defeat them, and then turn around and go attack the other side. So he just ends up picking off these detachments one by one before they could merge together.
I don't understand that strategy. Why, if you may have a numerical advantage, split, and they might not have had a numerical advantage.
Oh, I think they did.
Okay, so they do. Why split yourself in half?
You're underestimating.
Yeah.
Because again, this is the first guy sent afterward.
Okay, so I guess the surprise attack, you don't really know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, so he ends up ambushing him, routing. He had an advanced force of 2,000, this Vernius guy, that he sent with his legate Lucius Furius maybe.
Furious is better.
Right after that, Spartacus, again, that's when he circled back. Another deputy named Lucius Cassinius, completely caught off guard, and while his troops were encamped by a river, he ends up getting killed in the fight, and his entire camp and all of its supplies. Again, as they're knocking these guys out, because they're sending larger forces, they're still getting their asses kicked, but they're just sending them more and more equipment. Basically, at this point, Rome is funding the slave revolt.
And we talked about with the Mongolians, their whole goal was don't bring a baggage train, we'll just continue to live off the land as we advance. Whereas the slave revolt's just like, they'll bring it to us.
This guy, he eventually manages to actually corner the slave army because, again, it's winning, but it's not growing as large as it does up to that 70. It didn't like just all of a sudden jump to 70,000. It's slowly getting there. And so he ends up cornering the slave army with his remaining forces. Basically, Spartacus, seeing that he was trapped, they didn't have enough equipment to outfit everybody. At the same time, they hadn't established themselves to have like a source of food. They just were still on the move at that point, kind of surviving as they came into other areas. They had to end up buying time to sneak like this massive following of men, women, and children out of the camp at night. So as they're kind of camped within range, he has them take bodies and tie them to stakes, has them burn fires all night in the camp, and then has them blow like horns every so often to like announce like watch changes and everything like that, and basically sends all like the women and children and as much of his army as he can out of the camp at night.
Just ghost armies it.
Yeah, exactly. And so by the time Vernius realizes it's a ghost camp, storms in the lines the next morning, they'd already vanished into the darkness. They end up finally clashing in like a full like pitch battle. The result was a complete disaster for Rome. Vernius basically or all of his men are scared shitless of the gladiators after this like first initial clash and just end up fleeing the battlefield.
Makes sense.
Well, yeah.
I
And
do
you're
that too.
putting those guys 100% in the vanguard, in the front, where they're charging straight at the teeth for the leader.
Yeah.
Well, that's what ends up happening. So Vernius ends up getting pulled off his horse, has to escape on foot, is nearly taken prisoner, loses his fasci, which is that bundle of rods and the thing that was the ultimate like symbol of authority in Rome, which Spartacus then takes and parades around the camp, making fun of it the whole time.
Oh, man.
This gives them control over like almost all of southern Italy during the winter of 73 to 72 BC.
You can't help but be cheered for them. You can't help but be so happy.
100%.
I'm sure that even the townspeople that weren't being robbed by them, there was probably a little bit of like, yeah, fuck yeah.
Yeah, and as you are able to kind of like get yourself stationary, knowing that you're not going to get marched on in the winter, then you can kind of take stock and be like, what do we need? How many people do we have? Let's train. Let's get everyone equipped. Let's try to scout some estates to see if there's any people we can free and any supplies we can take. And that's kind of what they use that whole winter for, is to prepare for like full scale war. They can only go north. They don't have the ability to take off across the Mediterranean or anything like that. So Spartacus kind of has, and I think this comes down to the splitting thing that you were talking about. There's some debate on what the end goal of this was going to be. Now, they had to come south initially because they were coming from Capua. They couldn't go up past Rome when they were still weak. But now that they had this larger army, they had the option of trying to fight their way north, get over the Alps, and then all the people could either go back to Gaul, could go back to Thrace, could go make a life for themselves and try to get out of, where the empire was or the republic was at that point. And that kind of seems like that's the goal initially when they first come out of the winter.
I don't think you're wrong in any of that thinking. Part of me wonders if that is the plan and if that is the goal, to get up into Cisalpine Gaul and then spread out to where you were from before. If those areas are still taken, not Gaul and everywhere, but if those areas like in Thrace or any of the places that have already been raided and held by the Romans, going back to those places is probably a non-starter, right?
But you don't know what remember what like Caesar would do. He would go ahead and come completely out of an area, leaving like a skeleton crew, and then stuff would always flare back up. That was the thing he was dealing with for the longest time. So if you were just going in there to fight and then you left just kind of like a token party there to kind of hold it, you could go into that country and live somewhere where they weren't, or go even further or something.
Yeah.
But you would much rather be someplace where you could communicate or where you might have friends or like resources and then make your play from there.
I just wonder if it's almost going up into Gaul in that area, if it's almost like you're just always going to be on the move. Like
you're going to be able to move the other way anyway.
Yeah.
If you don't get up there, at least
That's
you
what
have a
I'm
chance
saying.
up there. And there's less of them up there. You're on the other side of the Alps. They really have to want to try to come fuck with you at that point.
And you're just walking into foreign territory, though. You don't know what's up in Gaul. That could be another fight waiting on the horizon. Usually when those Gallic tribes see a group of Romans coming towards them, it's not
That's when you're taking off the armor. They avoid attacking any like heavily fortified cities so they don't take losses, and basically due to their lack of like siege engineering, they just raid like little agricultural states and small towns. understanding that they can't just rely on like stolen gear, they set up manufacturing operations in like the winter camps. So Spartacus is like, no gold or silver within the camp, but if you can acquire like raw bronze and iron, because gold's not going to keep us alive. Getting our army equipped and having them ready to fight is what's going to keep us alive and what will eventually get us gold if we want to try to go after that stuff. They use traveling merchants and local blacksmiths to like forge thousands of brand new shields and swords. So they're not being reliant on the Romans to basically provide them this stuff. Sure, they're taking stuff as they raid these estates, but they're full on making themselves self-sufficient and being able to kind of supply their own forces as they keep gaining them.
And it's the reason why it was done in the first Servile War and they cleared out that first city and they kept the iron workers is the same logical reason why they're doing it in the third Servile War. Not necessarily that it was the example, it was just the most common sense thing that the most valuable people that you could have that weren't slaves were going to be somebody that can make you weapons.
Well, yeah, and as you're taking these estates, you are capturing these like massive granaries filled with wheat, barrels of olive oil, cellars of wine. And you're able to then feed your growing force as well. And we've talked about it in so many different episodes that we've talked about like small forces trying to rebel. Half the time, fuck, it's against Rome. The big thing is they can't keep themselves supplied for long enough. They end up breaking up and then they go and pick them off one at a time after they have to, split up. So being able to keep everybody well supplied, well fed. Southern Italy is like apparently their herding country, so they would seize herds of cows, sheep, and pigs to provide like a steady supply of meat. Captured baggage trains gave them access to military rations. Apparently there were I didn't even think about this, mobile mills to grind the grain that they would take and like armies would send with them and everything like that. And his method of like dividing the loot and resources equally among his people, basically that was a universal way of establishing everyone on a level playing field. So regardless if it was Thracians, Celts, Germans, anything like that, it wasn't playing favorites with anyone. Everybody got equal loot, equal resources, and that made it to where there wasn't any tension between any of these groups that would normally probably not be like super keen on getting along with each other.
I think there's still that ultimate unifying factor, though, that they're all slaves.
Oh, definitely.
So even if it's only 2 cents, whatever they were getting and they were rationing out, they still were kept on the same playing field. They were still looked at as equals, even though they've broken the bonds of slavery.
Well, and it's huge as a recruitment tool too, because as they're moving here, and you get these local poor, even free peasants that didn't necessarily weren't behooving to anyone, but their life they couldn't get any leg up or anything like that. They're looking at this as well as again all these other runaway slaves that knew they would be fed and be treated fairly if they joined up.
What do you have to lose?
Exactly. And I mean, most of the runaways had spent their entire lives working on the farms that they're now basically coming back to Spartacus and being like, we're from the area. We know where everybody grows everything. We know where all the the estates are and all that kind of stuff. Let us show you. And then we also know what it's going to take to manage these fields or to gather the crops, and we can do all that.
We also know where all the mean slave owners are.
Yeah, so 100, just all the, it doesn't, anybody. But yeah, I mean, they knew where the best water sources were as well, like in the areas, so they would be able to move around their camps and everything when the crops would be ripe for harvest. And then also they didn't have to worry about people not knowing how to tend to the livestock.
It's a network that they're uncovering that they didn't even know existed, but it's so beneficial.
What does every war boil down to? Logistics.
Mm-hmm.
They're creating a full, sustainable, logistics network. And I think that's also kind of where it differs from the other servile wars as well. Because while they could just do that on Sicily, now you're able to do that in a lot of different places in Rome, or at least the southern portion right now.
And you can only do so much in Sicily. The population's only so big and the island's only so big. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're cruising around the mainland, there's just going to be more people.
Yeah. Rome is going to be resupplying you more often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we come to spring of 72.
And along the lines of spring of 72, it's this is where the accounts kind of start to differ and get a little bit muddy. I kind of went through two different accounts, Appian and Plutarch, and just kind of bounced back and forth between them because they kind of fill in different gaps. Also, they kind of run counter to each other. It's pretty much agreed upon, though, that there were kind of two slave armies that were to kind of separated now.
Yeah.
Crixus sort of had his forces that he had walked away with. A lot of the indications are that he took about 30,000 slaves that came with him. And then you have Spartacus, who has his own forces of everybody that stayed and decided to be with him.
Yeah.
You have two consuls that come on board, and each one of these consuls are given legions. So now you actually have Roman army. We've beaten up all of the militias. Everybody doesn't want to come play. Now we have to bring Roman soldiers that are full on trained to do this.
Well, and what's everybody been hearing in Rome for the entire winter, and what have you been having to gear up to do? They know that the Spartacus and all of them haven't been defeated. They hear reports of what's going on down there. They're gathering their forces. They're gathering their strength. So it's not like you can just be like, hey, when spring rolls around, let's send a few more of the volunteer forces down there. You got to be very well organized.
Also, kind of a crazy move to send both consuls, right? Because you have Lucius Gellius and Gnaeus Cornelius. These were both consuls. These were the two leaders of Rome that were sent down there. So we're not just getting one consul with the other guy staying back and running the politics. We're coming at him with both barrels at this point.
And I think kind of where the split between the, Spartacus, Crixus, and everything kind of just comes along, like you said. It finally came down to the point of, like, what are we going to do? Spartacus, as it kind of sounds like, is like, I'm going to go ahead and head for Cisalpine Gaul. I'm going to get over the Alps, and then we're just going to try to make a break for it. Or at least the people that we've freed that aren't a legitimate army, but we've been trying to train them to be soldiers. We're bringing on women and children and all these people from these estates that we're doing. Let's try to get these people out of here. He might have wanted to turn around after that point and come back. And he's like, then I'll come back and I'll help you completely fuck up Italy. But let's get these people out now.
Crixus seemed pretty comfortable in this little breadbasket that they built.
No, definitely. And I mean, Crixus kind of had the loyalty, I think, of mostly like the Celtic and the Germanic slaves, because that's who ends up kind of going with his group of like 30,000. And as he's going to kind of stay down there. And when you're thinking about Italy too, I mean, Spartacus has to go all the way up north past Rome. I mean, you can go far to the east if you need to, but you're still going up past that. And Crixus kind of serves as almost a little bit of a distraction, being like, we're also going to stay down here and kind of mess with shit. So it's going to draw, this is also where they think we are. So if they're going to send people down here, you guys can maybe have a shot to get north while we're staying down here and plundering and messing up more of these estates.
And Gellius takes his legion, and I believe they end up besieging them around Mount Garganus, which sounds like a pretty big mountain. They end up killing Crixus and like 2/3 of his forces. So it's a pretty big rout if you're talking about if Crixus had taken about 30,000 of his men. Pretty big loss. Plutarch kind of accounts the following happenings of Spartacus's forces end up coming up and they squash Cornelius's forces.
Oh man, you were skipping over so many details about this stuff.
I think that's Appian is the other one that gives a lot of the other details.
Oh, do you have it separated by that?
Yeah, go ahead with Appian stuff.
Okay.
Because I like Appian's look at this better.
Okay, so as Spartacus is, and I'll jump back to Crixus here in a second, the 30,000 down south. So as they moved up the Italian peninsula, they traveled through the Apennine Mountains, and then also along the way, Spartacus' forces engaged and defeated the Roman consul Lentulus. Is it Clodianus?
Yeah, that's Cornelius. I forgot that Lentunus, Clodianus are his last two Roman names. So we'll go with Clodianus.
And the governor of Cisalpine Gaul, who's Gaius Cassius Longinus at what's modern-day Medina. Now, as they were going up there, so basically from his perspective, Spartacus's gateway is open through Cisalpine Gaul. So going back to where Crixus is actually, fighting down south, the Roman Senate ends up, like you said, dispatching the two full consular armies. and they're sent to intercept Crixus at Mount Garganus, like you said, and it was Lucilius Gellius Publicola and his praetor Quintus Arius was sent with like 12 or 10 to 12,000 armored, like heavily armored and armed soldiers. So these are like what you would see at the beginning of Gladiator, like the full-blown army, the artillery, the catapults, marching in lines, not getting through the shield wall, that kind of stuff. Professional soldiers. Like these guys, each of these guys is worth like 3 of these like militia guys.
Rome has stopped playing.
Yes. Now, according to kind of like historical accounts and everything, what this guy does, Gellius, is he deploys like all of these heavily disciplined army that's used to fighting together defensively along the crest of like this mountain slope, and is used to essentially, or has heard that basically these guys will just charge in based upon how they've defeated all of these other forces. And the con of that is that for Crixus and his men, it has worked every single time. And so despite like the strategic disadvantage and despite having more people, Crixus and his men charged like directly up the slope. It says they fought, of course, with incredible bravery and desperation, launching 3 separate assaults, but just being up there with those shields, probably having arrows and javelins and everything like that rained down on you, superior equipment, organization of the Roman legions, they just systematically like just piece up the army. And like you said, out of his 30,000 followers, 20,000 were killed on the field. Crixus is slain during it, and 10,000 of them end up kind of heading north to try to meet up with Spartacus.
They finally came up against a professional force where, regardless of the new fighting styles or tactics that they were taking, the reason why the Roman army was so good is because they were surgical when they got onto a battlefield in that situation.
And they had a refined tactic going against all these other countries in open warfare for how many hundreds of years.
Yeah, it's in the end, Crixus might have been an awesome gladiator.
Yeah.
He was never charged to lead an army.
Yeah. And you're going uphill against a more defensible. I mean, in every war that we've discussed something like that, it doesn't turn out well for the people going against the defensive positions.
Never.
After Crixus's defeat, the consuls, so, like with the guys we were talking about, Lucius, Gellius. I hate that they have multiple names, so I never know which one to refer to him as. So Lucius and Gnaeus, they attempt to squeeze Spartacus's forces between their 2 armies. Now, I would assume that they probably try to follow the people that are heading north.
Yeah.
And around this time, Spartacus, I think, has already decided that he's going back south. They end up trying to squeeze his army between their 2 armies, and Spartacus just kind of like does the same thing and says, if you guys are going to split, I'm going to go take you out one at a time instead of waiting for you both to converge on me. He defeats both of them in open battle, and around this time, I want to say he had between like 60 and 80 troops capable of fighting. The Romans had roughly 40,000 between the 2 armies, but again, highly experienced.
Yeah. 60 to 80,000 against 40,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Whenever I see legions, it throws me off because I always thought that legions were like 5,000.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, and I think it differs depending on what like era of time you're in.
Yeah.
I thought this part was pretty cool. So to honor Crixus.
Yes.
Yep. So Spartacus forces between 300 and 400 captured Roman soldiers to fight to the death as gladiators in funeral games for Crixus.
He says that he's sending them up with reinforcements. He's going to make sure that some of these guys that killed him are headed up there too. Well, probably headed down there, depending on their religious beliefs.
Yeah.
As Crixus is ascending, he's sending 300 of these soldiers to the underworld.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, this caused, the disrespect that Rome, like this is massive outrage and massive terror in Rome. Because now at the same time, it's not just about going out and fighting. These are consul armies. Like, this is Roman army that went out there and just got beat. What's going to happen if you guys just lost, and they didn't lose all 40,000. There were like, again, were the captured ones, the killed ones. But at this point, is it going to be an assault on Rome? That's got to be the fear of everyone right now.
And there comes this abandoning of the plan of headed to Cisalpine Gaul and beginning to head south. You're going to be, in a way, headed kind of right by Rome. Mm-hmm. But just like you talked about earlier with them going against fortified cities, Rome's going to probably be the most fortified city in the world at that point, you would say?
I would imagine.
So your lack of siege weapons that stop you from going after these other cities, it's only common sense to say you don't march on Rome.
At the same time, how many places surround Rome that aren't behind that wall?
Yeah.
That would just be, and then the force of people, it maybe wouldn't take them sieging and getting through in the city, but imagine you drive everybody from all the outlying areas into Rome. You then just, not even a siege to attack, but a siege to hold them in there. Who's going to come march to your defense if you have that position?
It's true, but what do you do if you take Rome?
Sack the shit out of it.
The people are going to fight back.
They are.
And if you have around 1 million people in Rome, regardless of how many of them are slaves, that's still going to be enough people to squash out your rebellion.
So. No, but how many of those slaves are going to be like, we're free? Yeah.
I don't even know I think all the slaves get killed before they end up knocking on the gates.
No,
I don't know what you do with Rome at that point in time, because it was not necessarily too big to fail.
Probably burn it down.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't see the strategic point of Rome, but also interestingly enough,
you destroy Rome. Can you imagine what a dent? You're trying to bring the whole thing down. The whole system that's keeping the slavery thing going. You're going to do as much damage as you possibly can.
It's great for slavery, but doesn't that throw kind of the whole empire into war?
Great. Then everyone can rise up and gain their independence back, and everyone's happy.
I feel like it's a big piece to fall.
You're also showing everybody they're not invincible.
Yeah.
Regardless,
if you get beat by a slave revolt, you're pretty invincible.
I mean, regardless of this point, because they are so terrified that it's actually going to happen, the Roman Senate strips the failed consuls of their command, and they basically hand supreme military authority over to Marcus Licinius Crassus, so we're just going to say Crassus for now, who is the wealthiest man in Rome, and raises an army of 8 legions, so roughly another 40,000 soldiers.
Before we get to Crassus, why is it that everybody that has a shot at taking Rome ends up deciding just to go south? Because we have Hannibal that forced his way across the Alps, marched down into Italy, cleared everybody out, had a chance at going to Rome, and then just went and camped out in the south.
Yeah, and I think Hannibal had the intention of, I think maybe Hannibal was just kind of like, hey, I need to see where this thing ends. But I think for Spartacus, based on what they do, and I don't know if they do it out of desperation or not, when they are trying to get over to Sicily, I think based on knowing what happened or at least at this point, he's definitely heard what happened during the last.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, there's a ton of them in Sicily. If we can get over there and we can get our force combined with theirs, we just defeated two consular armies. They're going to come at us with more of them. It's like when you're in GTA and you get the rating, the stars. They're at force. There's no going down. They can go chill out in Sicily. They can gather those forces. They can train those people to fight. And then it's good luck, Rome, come onto the island. We control all the food. I think that eventually becomes his game is, if I'm going to go back down south and keep this revolt going and make it something big, there's one place I can draw like an army from. It's not going to be if I get over the Alps, because everyone's going to scatter at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know what causes this change, and if he's like, my boy Crixus, I'm going to do this for you, Crixus, or whatever it is. Or it's just like, I never know what happened to his wife.
She doesn't get mentioned besides she's with them when they escape.
Yeah. So I don't know if maybe at this point she's died or something like that, but he decides that he's going to kick this thing off, and he has to do so by getting all of these new reinforcements.
And to me, this is the only logical play that he has. Because if you want to try to have a successful servile war, if you go to the two places that had some pretty good measures of success before in these first two Servile Wars, you're going to come back with a fighting force that's going to be ready to go.
And what's going to happen too, where, even just doing the revolt on the island during the first two, they didn't get taken down for like a year or even responded to. If you could get Spartacus's forces, we've already set Rome back quite a ways for what they can use for militia, for what they can gather for an actual army. If we can get ourselves across the Strait of Messina, have access to all these people, for them to build up enough strength to come at us, it's going to be some time in which we can then just reinforce ourselves and entrench ourselves and try to keep this island.
And what stops us from this becoming a free man state?
Yeah.
They're eventually going to have to
They have to
capitulate.
transport everyone to us. They can't invade us in mass.
If they need the agriculture that's still on this island and we take it over, eventually they're going to have to play ball.
Yeah.
I don't think that Rome is the piece that it sounds like it is, but Sicily to me is a very, like, if we get a hold of this, we kind of got them by the balls. There's not much that they can do. I wish that that's what happened. I wish that they had made it down there. 71 BCE, the Senate kind of puts this slave problem, as Chris was talking about, in the hands of Marcus Licinius Crassus. Now, if you're thinking, hey, I've heard Adam and Chris say Crassus's name a lot. He seems to have played a pretty big part in that Caesar episode. It's because Crassus played a massive part in the Caesar episode.
PCP? PCP?
Yeah. Pompey. Wait.
Oh, no, it's CPC. Crassus, Pompey, Caesar.
Or CCP.
CCP.
Crassus had seen action as a field commander under Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Sulla being the man who forced Caesar to either divorce his wife or go on the run, sending Caesar on the run, where he was then captured by pirates, which piracy leads to a lot of slavery.
Go listen to the Caesar episode. It's wild.
Yeah, it's so intertwined. Sulla also the same guy who fights the civil war against Caesar's uncle, Gaius Marius. He was known as the richest man in Rome. And part of the reason why he was the richest man in Rome, because he owned the fire department. And he seems to have owned a whole lot of stock.
Little Ben Franklin, huh?
Yeah, except for this guy may have been going around and starting the fires, because his business motto was, I'll show up to a house, I'm going to buy a lot of real estate. If this house is on fire and I have the
that's
fire
right. He'd start
department,
offering the people next door.
that, and he would say, okay, I'll give you this much for it. The people are like, no, the house is worth that much. He goes, okay, well, I'll wait a half hour until it burns down further, and then we'll renegotiate. He had, I mean, if he was the richest man in Rome, good chance he was the richest man in the world at that point.
Well, I mean, he had some pretty fucked up business models, because that went over to how he commanded his troops too. Because when a portion of them actually fled in cowardice during like an early skirmish with Spartacus, Crassus revives this like brutal punishment called decimation that Rome used to do.
I like
and
this.
He forces the soldiers to draw lots and beats to death 1 out of every 10 men in the disgraced units to ensure that they fear him more than the enemy. So it could have been one of the units could have fled, and one of the guys in the unit was like, no, I'm staying. He could have been the one to stay. He still might have been the one pulled out of the unit and killed.
Well, this, depending on the Appian or the Plutarch versions of this, he took in 6 legions himself. He absorbed the 2 legions from Lucius and Gnaeus, who had failed before. I believe it's Plutarch that says, for punishment because of the first 2 failed legions, we're just going to go through and decimate now. And like you're saying, they draw lots, and whoever draws the shortest lot is the one that dies. But the way that he dies is the other 9 guys in that group beat him to death. So everybody,
So they get to see what they could be in store for.
And then, as you were talking about, the other version is the retreat. The Appian version is the retreat, and then the decimation.
I like yours more.
It's one of those things where, regardless, this happens so far in the beginning of Crassus's run that he sets the tone that there will not be any tomfoolery anymore.
He systematically wins several engagements against the slaves. Spartacus is forced to retreat all the way to like the toe of the Italian peninsula. And whether it was the plan originally or whether he was going to keep trying to fight his way toward Rome or north, he tries to strike a deal with these, I almost said Sicilian. No, it's Cilician. The Cilicians are back. These Cilician pirates to ferry 2,000 of his men across the Strait of Messina into Sicily to ignite a new slave revolt there. Because if they could do it there, regardless if they lost a bunch of the men on the mainland, they could always then, create that revolt and have a new army on the island. And I don't think they were doing it selfishly. It was just like, hey, if we want to try to keep this thing going, we got to try to get across with as many people as we can.
Well, like we were just talking about, all you got to do is sit on the island. You don't even have to come back to Italy.
Yeah, but the fact, he was trying to get as many of his people because he had a lot more than 2,000.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the pirates pretty much take his money, give him the finger, and abandon the rebels, leaving them stranded on the coast. So now they're even in more of a isolated, area.
You never trust a pirate.
Nope. So to basically starve the rebels out, Crassus orders he doesn't pull a Glaber and just try to block the path and then hope that they can't sneak around. He orders the legions to build a massive 35-mile-long wall and ditch system. So the ditch is 15 feet wide and 15 feet deep across the entire isthmus of this place called Rhegium that basically cuts off Spartacus from the rest of Italy. So they were out on a little spit of land, 35 miles, and then on the other side of this ditch is where they would actually comprise like the wall. That would be like a wooden palisade or reinforced with stone or like a excavated earth.
Did we skip over Mummius?
Did we skip over Mummius? What happened with Mummius?
Like, my favorite name out of this whole entire thing, Mummius. Mummius was the legate for Crassus. And Crassus, at the beginning of some of these engagements, I want to say it might have been the first engagement, he says, Mummius, go ahead and circle to the rear of Spartacus's forces, and I need you to scout out, see what you can see. At no point in time do you engage. Do not engage at all. Report back.
Do not engage their rear.
I know that it sounds fun. I know that the Greeks made it sound awesome. Don't engage their rear. Mummius goes, got it, Moss, not going to happen. As Mummius shows up, he sees that the cheeks, if you will, have been spread, and there is a weakness that he can exploit from the rear. So Mummius goes ahead and launches the attack that Crassus said don't do.
I'm going to be a hero!
They end up getting handled pretty swiftly, and it's just basically a rout of, I want to say that he had 2 legions that he had taken with him. And so these 6 legions that Crassus attacks with end up taking, as you were talking about a fifth of the forces that were with him. And I don't know the exact numbers, but a fifth is, it's a hell of a lot of forces. I mean, it's a ton. Crassus starts to push these engagements and win these engagements, and we already saw kind of a split in ideals that you could say between Spartacus and Crixus that kind of split this first slave revolt up. But they weren't always held together well as they were winning. Now they're losing. Now you have basically groups of this revolt, these rebels, that are trying to break off and kind of go hand to hand with some of Crassus's forces. And we're talking about Roman legions. So this isn't a deal where you can just peel off 100 slaves and go try to fight this small force that's coming up on your left, because you're just going to get wiped out. And it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts at this point in time, because he's not losing in these big full-scale engagements, but these defectors are getting picked off, and whether they're defecting or not, they're still fighting on the same side.
So this was the 1/3, because it's only the 1/3 that makes it through the fence, right? Or it makes it through the...
I believe that happens prior to them building the fence, prior to them getting screwed on the boat deal. Because as the fence goes up, I have some contention with the fence story, because I'm sure you heard it too. Allegedly, as they were trying to push back against this fence and they couldn't get through, finally this last desperate act that Spartacus takes happens on like a winter's night, that they're able to fill in this moat and then cross to try to break through up into the center.
Well, I mean, it's okay. So if you figure if it's 35 miles long, you find an area that's not like super well defended.
And how well could you build defenses for 35 miles that quickly for Crassus?
Well, and what's said is that they ended up packing it with like brush, wood, earth, and then also like dead prisoners that they had taken, and a bunch of like pack animals and everything. And you only have to fill up, it's 15 by 15. So, I mean, you just have to do it to where you're able to kind of get up and over the other side. And then as they tried to breach this section, they ended up overwhelming the guards. But he was only able to lead about 1/3 of his army through. And then the reason that they think that it was more likely that could have occurred is they've discovered portions of the wall, like small ones that had been built of like stone. But they had found like high concentrations of broken iron weapons, including like gladiator blades, sword handles, Roman javelin points at like a specific point.
So there's just a line that you can trace out these little pockets.
That you can basically say like there obviously had to be clashes and like a battle here at this section that wouldn't have taken place anywhere else because like a bunch of weapons were dropped.
How cool would that be? Is your retirement goal to retire to Italy and just walk that line with the metal detector?
Yeah.
And see what you can find along there? That would be cool. Eventually, he does get the breakthrough that he needs. They begin trying to kind of move up north towards Cisalpine Gaul, and this is where kind of the noose begins to tighten on this revolt.
So the people that end up splitting with him, the large group consisting of mostly Gauls and Germans, or what was left of them that didn't leave with Crixus, they end up leaving under this guy named Castus, and then also Gannicus. They break away. Crassus quickly capitalizes on that split and ends up just massacring that separate force. So at this point, because they're fracturing, there's not a lot of direction to go. It's not death by 1,000 cuts, but as they just branch off, there's no one that's going to be equipped enough to beat Crassus.
Your forces are just dwindling.
Yeah.
There's not a lot that you can do.
And as you're turning back to fight, it's probably not a lot of like the women or children that are turning back. They're staying with you. It eventually comes to a head April 71 BCE, hemmed in by Crassus and kind of learning that the Roman general Pompey, so there's where Pompey comes in here, is returning from Spain to basically steal the credit for the victory. Spartacus is like, nope, and turns to face Crassus basically and just kind of what's going to end up being, regardless, one way or the other, the final time that they're going to meet. And this takes place at the Salarius River in modern, Lucania?
Yeah. Prior to this, I mean, this is how desperate he was. You have Pompey's forces coming from the north. You have the Macedonian proconsul named Marcus Terentius that's coming from the east, or Terentius Lucullus. So the other guy that failed from the other Servile Wars, Lucullus, this is like his nephew. So you have Macedonian forces coming from the east. You have Pompey coming from the north. You have Crassus coming from the south. He tried to negotiate a peace deal with Crassus.
Yeah.
And at this point in time, Crassus, looking at this, is saying, well, if I put this down, I'm pretty much on easy street.
Well, I have to put this down because I'm the one that's been seeing it through. If I've done all the legwork, I've taken out the group that splintered off and everything, and then Pompey ends up coming in. It's not going to matter if I was the one that got them down to 5,000 troops. It's who's going to take out Spartacus who's going to get the credit.
Yeah, he knows that he's on a clock. And I'm sure when Spartacus came to him for a peace deal, he thought, yes, Pompey's not going to get here in time. I think we're going to be okay. And, I mean, they were. But Spartacus pulls maybe, I don't know how true it is, but maybe one of the most badass moves in history.
It's equivalent to the Herb Brooks, "You were born to be hockey players" speech, except it's just a lot more violent.
Yeah, and there's a horse that dies.
That's what I meant by the violence. Yeah.
Before this battle ends up happening, Spartacus pulls up in front of his troops. He jumps off of his horse, turns around, slays his horse as a sign of there will be no retreat at this point. He looks at his guys and he goes, if we are victorious, we'll have plenty of horses. if we are defeated, there's no need for a horse.
Yeah. And as far as again, this is all coming from, Roman accounts. Victory is written by, or, history is written by the victors and everything. But it said that he leads a daring charge directly at Crassus. He's like, if we're going to end this battle, we got to try to break their ranks. And doesn't get to Crassus. His charge was incredibly lethal, though, because he put basically in like a spearhead basically all of his best fighters to try to get through there. He cuts his way deep into the Roman ranks, ends up personally killing 2 Roman centurions that are like highly experienced elite officers.
If you're getting to the centurions, you've
Yes, you've gotten to the outer ring of, or technically that's probably closer to like the inner ring that's actually
if you've made your way to the centurions, you've done some things.
Yes.
That Mighty Ducks flying V style attack that you put on these guys has penetrated pretty deeply.
Yep. They had a bunch of Julie the Cat Gaffneys back there protecting Crassus. Spartacus is cut down and killed on the battlefield. His body is actually never found. So I'm guessing Crassus did something fucked up to it.
That's what I'm saying, man. Maybe he snuck out. Maybe his wife was still alive and they took the back door and ended up escaping and went somewhere else. Maybe Spartacus didn't die on that battlefield.
At what point?
I don't know. Maybe
he killed the 2 centurions and then was just like, bye.
Maybe he didn't even kill the 2 centurions. Maybe that's all fabricated by the Romans. I just got to hope that he was able to sneak out. And
so Crassus is just like, some warrior ends up getting through, killing 2 centurions. Crassus is just like, this must be Spartacus, right? And
Close
they're like,
enough.
oh no, it doesn't really match the description. Nope. This is Spartacus, right, everybody? And everyone's like, yeah. And they're like, burn the body. We got to get rid of the body.
What are the chances that they even knew what Spartacus looked like, though?
I mean, they would, if he was a gladiator, a good one, he would be famous. They would have people that had witnessed him, that knew his description, that had seen what he looked like. I mean, I'm sure it's not going to be like, hey, he's this tall. They said the average height of those guys was like 5'8", which I can't say shit because like I'm 5'8", but it's nice to, it's nice to hear that. A bunch of like medium-sized gladiators, just everyone going nuts for it. It's kind of like it'd be the equivalent of like boxers that would be in like middleweight class.
As the charge is happening, you just hear everybody go, wah!
Do I sound like that? No. Fuck you.
Things get pretty brutal after Spartacus shuffles off this mortal coil. But our old buddy Pompey tries to end up taking credit back in the Senate because there have been 5,000 rebels that had escaped, and Pompey's forces went and chased down the 5,000 and killed them. And his justification was that while Crassus did kill Spartacus and took out the major forces, he was the one that ended it by killing the final 5,000.
Yeah, he plucked the war up by the roots, even though Crassus defeated the slaves. And here's another thing, too. I think that alone, that 5,000 that were killed by Pompey, Crassus was so pissed off about that to ensure another slave revolt never happened again, he takes 6,000 of the surviving captured rebels and crucifies them along a 120-mile stretch on the Appian Way, the most traveled road in Italy that went from Capua to Rome. So from the location where the Servile War, the third one with Spartacus, started, all the way to Rome. The bodies are left to rot there for years. And that's the most, not just like a slave traveled road, the most traveled road there. And I think they said there were bodies about every 100 feet.
The smell.
You knew when you were close to the Appian Way, I guess.
Yeah. It just the whole entire way, that whole 6,000 person stretch, and you're just walking into them every single time.
120 miles.
Well, what do you do? Like,
how long does that take to do?
Yeah, the works project for the Roman...
to make the crucifix. I mean, they were probably pretty good at making crucifixes, but... To dig them, to then,
you want to be the guy that starts the job. You don't want to be the guy that's putting up 5,000 through 6,000. Those are going to be disgusting.
Oh, I think they're still alive.
Oh, you think they were... Okay. No, I didn't think about that. Yeah, you're probably right.
It's bad all the way down, my man.
Yeah, so you're strapping them up as you're constructing the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a much darker way to look at it. I just thought they were tossing bodies up there, but the way that you said it's definitely right. Where live crucifixions were the norm.
And I mean, the end result on this is Crassus and Pompey both use this for, public acclaim and basically kind of use. I think this is kind of where Pompey and Crassus kind of start scheming together and everything, despite just having to try to steal each other's thunder. This is where they use the threat of their encamped legions to basically bully the Senate into making them joint consuls for 70 BC, which is what set that dangerous precedent of military commanders leveraging their armies that Caesar did when he came down. What was the name of the river?
When he crossed Rubicon?
Crossing the Rubicon.
Yeah, it's... As we talked about, these timelines are running parallel, and we have these figures that are bouncing back and forth between these. And a lot of Pompey's military acumen, and then Crassus being so goddamn rich and coming up with this win in the Third Servile War, they can work their way into the consulship, and Caesar is off basically fucking around in Gaul. This is when he's racking up all of his military charges.
This is when he's trying to make his money because, again, this partnership / frenemy / rivalry between Crassus and Pompey, this is what paves the way for the first triumvirate with Caesar. And then this concentration of power leads to the dismantling of the Roman Republic and the birth of the Roman Empire.
1 decade after the Third Servile War was put down, Crassus, Pompey, and Caesar formed the first triumvirate. And 27 years later, Caesar is assassinated, ushering in this Roman Empire. That was how close this happens to the shift and the change in Rome. And we didn't really have to bring it up during the Caesar episode because there was so much in his timeline.
Yeah.
It's wild. We talked a lot about Pompey and Crassus during that episode, kind of explaining their features, but I don't remember talking a whole lot about the Third Servile War with Crassus. I remember talking about the crucifixes that went up, and I remember talking about the fire stuff, but we didn't have to talk a whole lot about this because in that history, this is kind of a footnote to what happens. But this footnote kind of leads to the power struggle that creates Caesar's.
It gives them momentum to definitely make this happen. And I mean, the war devastated the agricultural landscape of southern Italy, caused an immediate slave shortage. And I mean, as much as you can say what any benefit that this led to, it was benefits born out of fear and just fearing the inherent danger of amassing, large numbers of like chain gang slaves. A lot of wealthy landowners, Roman landowners, began kind of shifting toward a system of like renting land to freed laborers and sharecropping to try to kind of keep them more, not complicit. What am I trying to complacent? Yeah. That they would have some type
docile.
Of like, yeah, exactly. Give them less of a reason to try to, all band together and fuck up the system. But while slavery remained standard, historians, like Plutarch and everything like that, basically stated that like the amount of terror that Spartacus struck into like the Roman elite kind of led to this very gradual long-term shift toward more humane treatment to try to, like I said, benefits born out of fear, to try to avoid getting, more of these slave revolts. Because they just experienced, 3 of them in, like you said, a span of like 60 years?
Yeah.
The last one taking 2 different groups of consuls to put down.
Well, like you say, is these large plantation owners that have 300, 400, 500 slaves that are out there working their fields are like, ooh, if I can sell this land to other guys and I can keep maybe 20 or 30 of them, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
I can be as mean to them as possible on a micro scale that they're going to be angry with me and I might kill a few, but at the same time, they're never going to rise up against me. And if we can keep them isolated in these certain different pockets to where they can't get together and they can't start to form these uprisings, it's only going to insulate us from this happening again. But I don't know quite how to look at it, because obviously slavery still continues.
Yeah.
And these were a major changer in kind of the way that Rome looked at slavery. But in the end,
it looked at how to do the business of slavery. It didn't look at it in the sense of like, should we be doing this? It was just like, is there a way to keep them from doing this again? Like, we don't want to quit doing this. We just don't want them to do this again. So like born out of this was this requirement to try to find different ways of handling the business of slavery. It was still fucking horribly wrong, but it was just like, what can we give them to keep them just content enough that it sounds like too much work or too much risk to give up what they have?
But it's because the Roman Empire thrived. It was a pillar of their economy.
Yeah.
It was a
so
slavery.
there was no option of getting rid of it. It was just like, how do we do it without upsetting the slaves too much?
Mm-hmm. We know this works. We know this makes us money.
For us.
We're not going to stop doing this because of a few revolts that happen, because ultimately the bottom line is still too good to pass this up. We just have to maybe build in some safeguards to make sure that we don't have this disruption in the economy.
Yeah. But yeah, crazy. I think they said something about like the Servile Wars being the only wars that have ever been justified.
And I think this is what the largest slave revolt in history. Followed shortly after by the Haitian revolt, I believe.
Who led that one? That was against the French, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
always the French. It's always the French.
It is always the French. It's a story that I feel like holds so much weight now because Spartacus is a star. Spartacus has been looked to from so many revolutionary standpoints.
Yeah, so many different, like, but it's not always the best leaders because, like, Karl Marx is like, I love Spartacus and everything, but it still stands as one of those figures that actually stood up for something that kind of everyone should be able to get behind and say, like, yeah, he was fighting for something right.
It's just the guys that bastardize it that are on the wrong side of history.
Pretty much, yeah.
Hoisting him up. But at the same time, I mean, I think that he's also, we're talking about a guy that we don't really have a good picture of, but I'm sure it was a smoking hot guy that got to play him in Spartacus, right? On Stars?
There was two of them, actually, because one of the guys died.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, he got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. That's how I know what that is.
That's what taught you.
Yeah, I was actually pretty broken up about it because I really liked that show. I was like, oh, man, that guy's really good. And then the other guy came in, and it took a little bit to warm up, but he did all right.
You finally got to...
Yeah, the first guy was just better because he was the one that was like, he introduced the character.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for a guy that didn't have his picture mass produced, he's never like a chunky looking dude that seems a little
but he
oafish.
was like in that he wasn't chunky or anything, but he had that subcutaneous fat. He knew what he was doing. But yeah, just someone that it's one of those rare circumstances of somebody, and we're going to talk about this a little more from the Gladiator episode, but like being a gladiator was coming from nothing or being able to come from nothing to being something. And I mean, there's been a lot of attempts to take out Rome. This was one of the closest ones. So there's something to be said about that.
Right? And the guy that got closest before that again was Hannibal.
Yeah.
Who's an all-timer. And this guy was just a slave.
That's the thing I think that most people don't realize is how like far Spartacus like went toward almost succeeding at that. Yeah. So
absolutely.
All right, you got anything else?
No, I think we're good here.
All right. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.